Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D in WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of what if Deku became the host of the Herrscher of the Void. All credits for this video go to their respective authors. So please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Chapter 1. Chapter text. Can I be a hero without a quirk? It was a question Izuku had always held in heart, a question he had always wanted an answer for yet always denied. He could ask it to anyone he met, his mother, his classmates, even the random people he met on the streets, but whenever they answered, he'd dismiss it. He'd find some rationale to pick apart their answer or outright ignore it. Now before him stood the one person whose response he would never dare question. Before him stood the #1 hero in all of Japan, possibly the world, All Might. Izuku watched the man with hope-filled eyes. His hero had saved him not a few moments ago from a villain. Perhaps he could give him the answer he had always wanted. No, you can't, All Might had answered. It wasn't any long drawn-out explanation either, no sense of belittlement. All Might had lifted his shirt, revealing the injury he had been fighting through. A wound unlike any Izuku had ever seen. A wound caused by a villain no one knew, that not only injured All Might but crippled him as well. All Might had in his defense tried to mitigate the blow. He had told Izuku about all the numerous other avenues he could pursue, but it didn't work. It was all white noise to Izuku, seeing as he had spent more time than needed. All Might leaving Izuku alone with only his thoughts. I'm so sorry, Izuku. You're nothing but a quirkless reject. As if he could be a hero. Countless voices filled his head as he looked down at his notebook. His dreams didn't matter. He couldn't be a hero. Not unless he had a quirk anyway. He collapsed on the roof, crying his heart out. Why did it have to be like this? Why was he born without a quirk? Why was he the unlucky one? Izuku failed to notice that his intense emotions had drawn the interest of another being. A small little creature, almost the size of a little insect, fluttered beside him. Its body was unnaturally white with numerous red and purple veins spread across it. The creature looked at Izuku, feeling his distress. It was perfect. The despair the hopelessness, it was all that would be needed. After Izuku had picked himself up, he gathered his things and walked home, his head low. After struggling for so many years, clinging senselessly to his dream, he felt defeated. He had reached rock bottom. Izuku looked at his notebooks, conflicted by what he saw. He had always made it a habit to write down whatever quirk he saw, hero or villain, big or small, he'd always write it down. He had hoped that with enough experience he'd be able to make up the difference. But even that seemed ridiculous now. What would he do when faced with someone who could injure All Might? Help me. A young boy stopped. Someone had called his name. He froze as he looked around trying to find the source. Then he saw it. A small yet unnatural-looking bug was fluttering at the junction, staring at him. He wondered if it was the one who called him. Yes, it answered as it fluttered closer to his face. Help me, the creature asked. Help you? Izuku questioned. No, he couldn't. He was no hero. He was nobody. Please help us, the creature repeated. Izuku stilled his resolve. Even if he didn't have a quirk, he could still try to help. Even if it only amounted to calling someone to help. If he tried, then perhaps he could still be someone. So he followed the creature. He followed it as it led him away from the city into a nearby beach, Tagoba Beach. Once formerly a famed tourist spot had turned into a dumping ground over the past few years. As he followed the creature, Izuku made his way further into the dump site. Surrounding him were mountains of trash, with no way of seeing the road. How ironic that he'd end up here, in the trash. No, now's not the time, Izuku told himself as he continued after the creature. He climbed and crawled through the garbage till he eventually found what the creature had been leading him to. At the edge of the coast, where the land and sea touched, there was an orb on the sand. Izuku looked at it in confusion as he approached the orb. It was unlike anything he had seen before. Stepping closer, Izuku could feel his hair stand on edge as the world around him started to feel different. It was heavier hotter more suffocating. His veins felt a little. He quickly took a step back, moving out of the orb's range. What is that? He questioned. My mistress, the creature answered. She's stuck, trapped in the orb. The creature told him. Please free her. It asked. Izuku was hesitant. That feeling it was unbearable. Please, the creature pleaded once more. As it did, the creature lost altitude, falling to the sand. Please, it said weakly. Izuku felt horrified when he saw the creature begin to evaporate before him. No this wasn't good. It was dying, he realized. He had to do something. Against his previous judgment, Izuku hurried to the orb and tried to grab it. If he released the master then surely she could save her servant. Without thinking, he grabbed the orb and then everything went to black. Where am I? Izuku wondered as he looked around. He was standing before a mirror. His reflection peered back at him. Where you need to be, his reflection answered, catching Izuku off guard. What? Izuku gasped. Had his reflection just talked? He moved closer to the mirror, his hand outstretched. I'm starting to lose my mind, he muttered. Not yet, his reflection whispered. This time though the voice was distinctly female and taunting him. Before Izuku could react, a hand shot out of the mirror, grabbing his own. Purple veins pulsed on the hand in the mirror as it pulled him. No, he gasped in horror. Yes, the reflection taunted as its face approached the mirror. Izuku watched in horror as his face rippled, dissolving before being replaced with another. Golden glowing eyes met his terrified green, and a confident and sinister smirk appeared. Another hand emerged and grabbed his other arm before the figure pulled him completely into the mirror. Dagobah Beach erupted as a pillar of purple energy shot into the sky. A lone figure standing among the wreckage. Where Izuku had been now stood a young woman with golden eyes and long flowing white hair. Flexing her fingers, the woman turned her head towards the city, a malicious smile gracing her lips. I declare judgment, she announced as she snapped her fingers. Several portals opened and numerous lances launched out of them. The Queen of the Void had returned. When Yagi regained consciousness, he awoke to find himself in a familiar medical ward. He tried to move his left arm but found he was unable to. His whole left side was in too much pain. He winced as he gave up and resigned himself to staring at the ceiling. How long was I out? He asked his nurse. At the side of his bed, waiting patiently, was a short elderly woman. She looked up at him with a sigh of relief. A little over 12 hours. She noted, however, as she spoke, a scowl formed on her face. You were pushing yourself again, weren't you? She asked. I had no choice, All Might answered. He had hoped that some hero would arrive who could have done a better job. Someone else could come and save the day while he was out. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Is the boy all right? He questioned. He had the vaguest memories of what happened. The moment things had gone south, he pushed himself. Running on only adrenaline, his memories had become a blur. The only distinct memory he could recall was screaming. Lots of loud screaming. He'll live, but the damage to his arms was severe. From what his doctors tell me, he was struck in both shoulders as well as in the groin. She admitted. She could see the visible wincing on All Might's face. For the most part, he is expected to recover, but there will be some complications. I failed, All Might noted. I was supposed to save him, but I was too slow. He sighed. He's alive, All Might. That's what matters right now. Recovery Girl reassured him. I've talked to the doctors and they said if he goes to therapy and takes his time he can recover and with some luck, live a semi-normal life. All Might didn't say anything, but the nurse could see from the way his body loosened up that it had at least put his mind at ease. That's right. That's what matters. He sighed. The boy may have been injured, but he was still safe. He could still be with his family and friends. However, a scowl crossed his face as another thought soon invaded his mind. What about the villains? All Might asked bitterly. What happened to them? Well, that's a little more tricky. Recovery Girl exhaled. The slime villain is dead. He was burnt to death from the boy's quirk overtaxing itself. When he was injured, the pain, fear, and adrenaline must have really pushed him over the edge. There is good news. Due to the circumstance, no charges will be pressed. It would be foolish if there were. All Might grumbled. I can't think of any judge or jury who would pronounce him guilty for defending himself. What about ... the girl? All Might asked with a rougher tone. What happened to her? As far as we know, she vanished without a trace. Recover Girl answered. That said, you clearly seem to have damaged her, but she was still standing in the end. Right now there are various agencies on the lookout for her. She's gotten quite a reputation after all the damage she caused before the fight. Damage? All Might questioned. This was the first he heard of there being any damage. Then again, he had only seen her when she had appeared. Recovery Girl shot him a sorrowful look before handing him his phone with a recent news article open. All Might glanced at the article, reading its content. His eyes widened in disbelief. The nurse had to quickly act before he could crush the phone in his bare hands. From what I heard, there were a lot of injuries, but so far no deaths. Recovery Girl added. Has there been any info found about her? An address or something that can be used to track her? All Might questioned. The police and other agencies are working on it, but so far nothing has surfaced beyond one thing, her name. Recover Girl answered. Her name? She calls herself the Herrscher of the Void. Izuku's eyes snapped open as he shot forward. His body was drenched in sweat. He looked around trying to discern where he was, only to sigh in relief when he noticed a familiar set of posters. He reached for the lamp next to him and turned it on. He was in his bedroom, back in his mother's apartment. What happened? He muttered to himself. He tried to recall what happened yesterday. His memories were hazy at best, but he could make out some details. Though, yesterday had not been the best day for him. He had almost died of a villain attack. He had his dreams crushed by his hero. His bully had told him to commit suicide. On second thought, maybe it was for the best. He didn't dwell too much on the past. It wasn't so good anyway. As he got out of bed, a sharp pain jolted through his shoulder. Ouch! He winced as he held his arm. His body felt sore. Not that it was anything new. Whenever Bakugo got him in his sights, he was usually far worse for wear. Weak. Izuku's eyes widened as he looked around. Who had said that? He got no response, and he didn't see any sources around his room. Maybe he should take the day off, after yesterday. His head probably wasn't in the right place. Leaving his room, Izuku dragged himself to the kitchen. He opened the fridge, scanning for anything to eat. Cereal and milk didn't seem appealing. He could try making a sandwich or something, or ramen. Oh, right, there was ramen. He took the cup of noodles and began to prepare breakfast. After he had finished cooking, he took the ramen and went to turn on the news. Maybe he could see something interesting. Who knows, maybe a new hero debuted. Hero. That word felt a little sour in his mouth. Nevertheless, he still turned it on, if only out of habit. He grabbed the remote and turned on the TV, before resting it on the table before him. It's been 14 HRS since the Herrscher of the Void appeared, and local law enforcement have not given any word on whether she's been apprehended or not, the news anchor announced. Izuku perked up as the screen displayed the news. A woman with long, beautiful white hair stood on screen in an alleyway. The area around her was in flames as an all-too-familiar slime villain was behind her. The slime guy, Izuku noticed. Oh no, when I grabbed All Might. Izuku realized in horror. He had let a villain loose. If he hadn't grabbed onto All Might, then the villain wouldn't have escaped. Way to go, Izuku. You really just allowed a dangerous villain to roam free. Now someone was hurt or worse, and it was all your fault. Stay back, or the kid gets it. The villain had taunted the woman. Wait, a kid, oh no. Izuku's breathing hitched. Please, don't say it was another kid who got hurt because of him. As the camera changed, the reporter explained the situation further. That's when Izuku felt his heart drop. The bowl of ramen fell from his hands as the reporter named the kid that was captured. Katsuki Bakugo. Bespoke as a familiar image was shown. Bakugo had been captured by the villain. Izuku's hands trembled at the scene. This was a nightmare. It had to be a nightmare. He reached to grab the remote only to find it had disappeared from where he had left it. Surprised, he had looked down at the table, only to find his bowl of ramen resting untouched in front of him. Wait, didn't he just drop it? How did it land on the table? He didn't hear it hit the floor. The news continued to play, showing the woman's face against the villain. At first, he had thought her to be a hero, possibly a vigilante, since those frequently showed up every now and then before being labeled as a criminal. She had seemed to hesitate at first when the villain announced he had a hostage. That's when Izuku saw it. A confident smile adorned her lips as she flicked her wrist forward. 3 white and gold lances appeared out of nowhere and fired at the villain. Izuku had thought maybe she'd have some pinpoint accuracy, shoot to immobilize or something. He was very wrong. He saw blood splat as Bakugo's shoulders were both pierced by the lances, with a third finding its way just below his belt before the video was censored. Izuku had thought maybe it was an accident. Maybe the woman had missed or the villain had moved Bakugo into harm's way. Right on target. The woman spoke. Izuku heard her voice clear as day, despite the footage showing her so far away from the one recording it. Izuku heard the screams and gasps of the crowd. He saw the pro heroes try to arrest the villain. But they couldn't. When they tried to touch her, she just phased right through them. She then turned to the camera, pulling it closer to her with what Izuku assumed was her quirk. That's when he saw it. The haunting gold eyes from his nightmare before. The woman looked at the camera with a confident and arrogant smirk, before clenching her fist and destroying the camera. The rest of the news recapped the remaining events. It didn't get better. According to the reports, numerous heroes in the area had tried to arrest the villain after she acted, and all of them were injured soon after. The list of casualties was not limited to just 1 or 2 people. Yet that wasn't even the worst part. Last of all Might had stepped in to thwart the villain. Suffice to say, he had put up a valiant effort as per usual. However, the situation then took an unexpected turn. A series of images appeared documenting the fight. All Might had been at an advantage at the start, but that soon disappeared when the Herrscher retaliated. However, the most noticeable similarity in all these pictures was how much often All Might's face scrunched up in agony as the Herrscher struck his side or attacked it using some other method. The fight had quickly risen the ranks to be proclaimed as one of the pro heroes' most brutal fights. However, that wasn't the only honor it had. It had another title, the one that had most people talking. All Might's first draw. He hadn't lost, but he hadn't won either. To the surprise of many, this young villainess had put up more than a decent fight for the hero. No one seemed to know who this girl was. All she did was give her name, her villain name at least, the Herrscher of the Void. She had no confirmed identity, no human alias. She was a dangerous threat at large, someone who upon arrival already showed her power by reaching a stalemate with All Might. Just the thought of a villain being on equal terms with All Might ... that alone was bone-chilling. Izuku turned his television off, too shocked by what he had witnessed. This couldn't be real, right? And I'm just getting started. Izuku heard her whisper. Wait ... what? He looked at the television, seeing it still turned off. That's when he realized ... that the sound didn't come from the TV ... it was coming right next to him. Izuku slowly turned his head, hoping that whatever god existed he was hearing things. Golden glowing eyes met green as Izuku froze on the spot, his blood running cold and his hair standing on the ends. Before him floated the Herrscher of the Void, an amused smile on her face as she glanced at him with predatory eyes. "Hello, little insect. Am I interrupting? I came as soon as I heard you were awake," a voice called out. All Might and Recovery Girl glanced at the door. Before them stood a figure renowned for his cunning intellect, his tactical genius, and his unassuming appearance. "Not at all, Principal." Recovery Girl smiled. "Principal Nezu, how's it been?" All Might nervously asked. "Oh, the same old. You know how it is, dealing with students and such." Nezu mused. "I'm glad to see you're doing okay, All Might." "Well, you know me, I won't go down that easy." All Might smiled. "Good to hear," Nezu told him. "I want you to know that I truly do appreciate you," Nezu informed. All Might frowned upon hearing those words. "What's the bad news?" he questioned. "Shio already informed me about the destruction the Herrscher caused yesterday. I know I'm not ready yet, but once I get the all clear, I'll be ready to track her down." "While I admired your dedication to the job, Toshi, I'm afraid that's only part of the problem," Nezu admitted. "There are times when being intelligent had its perks, and then there were times when ignorance truly was bliss. I just got word from Detective Naomasa. They've managed to track the origin of the Herrscher's attack." "Really? That's fantastic. Have they found any leads?" Toshi eagerly asked. "Unfortunately, that's where the good news ends. You see, the Herrscher's attacks originated at Dagoba Beach. However, when the investigation team arrived, we discovered just how devastating that first strike really was," Nezu said solemnly. "The area, as far as we know, is now a disaster zone. It's irradiated by a strange energy that we honestly don't have any information." "Irradiated?" All Might said in disbelief. "As in radioactive?" "I wish it was. That honestly might have been better. Whatever it is, it's not normal radiation. None of the usual procedures, whether through technology or quirks, is working on it. It's causing machines to malfunction on entry, and it's causing humans to become sick just by being close to the area. No one has died yet, but many of the people have been hospitalized from exposure. Quite a few of them have developed peculiar glowing red lines on their body," Nezu explained. "It's entirely dependent on the Herrscher's quirk," All Might realized, "which means we need to catch her as soon as possible, in order to hopefully undo the damage and possibly reverse it." The pro hero tried to get out of bed but was quickly stopped by Recovery Girl. "Oh no, you don't. You need to stay and rest," she instructed. "The longer I stay here, the more time she has to strike again," All Might rationalized. "You should listen to her, All Might," Nezu instructed. "As it stands, we have no idea of her whereabouts. At best you may find her, but you'll be exhausted, and at worst you'll worsen your condition even more." All Might have considered ignoring them, but even he knew they were right. If he let himself get worked up, then it wouldn't help anyone. "Good. Now we can discuss the other issue," Nezu told him once he was sure All Might wasn't going anywhere. "So far we have no data on her origin, but we've speculated." "We?" All Might questioned. "David Shield and Sir Night-Eye," Nezu clarified. "That fight wasn't exactly private. It was already being broadcast nationwide, and once you appeared on the scene it blew up ... and not in a good way. Oh, and I should inform you that Night-Eye is expected to call soon to discuss your successor. Recent events have made him more worried," Nezu added. "I'll keep that in mind." All Might be noted. "So what did you find?" "We have 3 scenarios. The first is that she's simply some aspiring villain with an extremely powerful quirk, in which case this makes me worry that there are other such villains just waiting for one bad day to snap," Nezu told him. "Even then, a single powerful quirk is no issue if we have Aizawa and a decent enough plan. This is the most optimistic scenario, mind you." "What's the others?" All Might asked. He had a sinking feeling he knew what one of them could be, but he really hoped he was wrong. "Scenario 2. Trigger. It's been a while since the drug was in circulation. If Trigger is involved, then we may have a more severe problem. We'll have an organization that's who knows how big, circulating the drug around and causing potential outbreaks of villains with enhanced quirks. Depending on how things play out, the Herrscher could be a one-off situation, or sign off more to come, in which case we'll need to find a cure for it and a way to cut off the supply," Nezu noted. "A larger task, but still within our capabilities. We cut off the supply and we cut off most of the problem." "Exactly. Trigger effects aren't permanent unless the user has undergone extensive surgery, and even then, it creates a dependence on the drug to ensure they can maintain the power. Number 3, however, is a different story." "All for one," All Might answered darkly. "I'm afraid so." Nezu sighed. With how extensive her powers and skill set were, it is very likely that the Herrscher has multiple quirks. We aren't sure how many, but given she can teleport, turn intangible, fly, and create projectiles, it's suffice to say she has an array. A single powerful quirk is one thing. Having 2 is not out of the realm of possibility, but more than 4. Only All for One would be capable of pulling off that kind of madness." All Might growled. Only AFO had the power to move quirks around like that. It wouldn't be the first time All Might had to deal with his multi-quirked minions. Even if All for One loved to hoard quirks for himself, it wasn't unknown for him to give out extras in return for loyalty and servitude. It also could explain how the Herrscher knew where to strike. I'm afraid so, Nezu answered. That's the worst-case scenario. I'm sincerely hoping it's the wrong one. Why do I feel that it might very well be the most likely? All Might dreaded. Izuku thought he was familiar with feeling fear. He had always felt it now and then in his life. He was a kid with no quirk, no special power to aid him, and surrounded by many with abilities so vast and dangerous that it would be strange not to feel scared. Regularly he saw criminals, always rushing to the scene of a crime in hopes of seeing a hero in action. After all, when in public if a villain showed up, so too would a hero. Even yesterday when Izuku had thought he was alone, a hero still showed up. All Might had come to save him. Now before him stood another villain, one who had broken into his house without him being any wiser, one who was supposedly just as strong as All Might. He had screamed as one might expect when he recognized her, throwing himself over the couch and backing away from her. She enjoyed the sight of it. He saw her smile widen as he cowered. He realized too late that he had put himself in a corner. He hadn't even fully recovered from the slime villain and now he was facing another one. I don't have anything of value, Izuku tried to reason. We're not a very wealthy family. He had hoped if he told the villainess the truth, maybe she'd realize it was pointless robbing them and she would leave. That's generally what some villains wanted, right? Money. Oh, I don't need wealth, she chuckled as she floated over to him, landing with making the slightest of sounds. I just need ... you. She smiled as she leaned closer to Izuku. Relinquish the remaining control of your body and I'll ensure that whatever happens next ... is quick and painless. She whispered into his ear. Wait ... what? Izuku was confused. Give her his body. What did she mean by that? Oh no, don't tell him it was that kind of villain. He paled even more as more horrifying images came to his mind. I mean exactly what I said. The young woman clarified. She lifted a finger and pressed it onto his chest. Your body, your mind, your soul ... ever since yesterday, she told him as she pressed her finger into him. Izuku's eyes could only stare in horror as her hand phased into his chest. It all belongs to me, now, she stated. He could feel her clenching her fist despite not seeing it. The Herrscher pulled her hand out soon after. It was unscathed with no blood and no indication of where it had been. Looking down he saw no hole in his chest. But that feeling was burnt into his mind. He tried to piece together how he even landed in this situation. What ... how? Izuku gasped, his mind connecting the dots. Wait a second ... that orb. The orb he had been lured to by that strange creature. The one it said held its mistress. Ah, so you can think. The woman answered. But you're correct. When you touched the core, you became a host to me, she explained as she gestured to herself. The Herrscher of the Void, she proudly proclaimed. What? But that's how ... it doesn't make any sense ... how is that even possible? Izuku's mind was at a loss for words. He tried to process it using the only thing he knew that made sense. Is this your quirk? It's amusing how much your head is looking like it will explode. The Herrscher chuckled. But no, it's not my quirk. I don't have such a thing as the rest of you insects, she explained. I am a Herrscher, a being born to bring humanity's destruction, she elaborated. Humanity's destruction? Izuku gaped. Yes, you should rejoice, Izuku. I sense the despair and hatred in your heart, buried deep within. It connected you to me. Then all I needed to do was lead you to me, the Herrscher explained, letting the pieces click into place for Izuku. You lied to me. Not so, I wanted help and you offered. How could I say no? She questioned. That's not. I didn't know. I would have never let you out if I knew. Izuku denied. Perhaps you wouldn't have, but that's irrelevant because you already did. I'm here and I'm not going anyway. The Herrscher chuckled. All you can do now is stop wasting our time and disappear, and let me take your body. I won't do it. Izuku denied. I won't give you my body. The Herrscher laughed before him. Oh, you think you have a choice. You already gave me your body. The only control you still have is how long you can still coexist with me, she told him. You see, I already can take over. I already did. She then glanced at the television. Izuku's eyes followed as the implications became clearer and clearer to him. Yesterday, when you touched the core, you went to sleep, and I woke up ... and I had a lot of fun. She smirked. A lot of fun. I'm sure you'd like it. What you're doing now, you're just delaying it, she told him. Delay ... you mean you don't have full control? Izuku noted. A flash of hope had come to him. It wasn't all lost then. I mean your body isn't adjusted to my power, she clarified. If you relinquish control, I can speed up the process and take over completely, but as for now, I'll have certain limits, the Herrscher explained. Make no mistake, I will gain full control. It's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when, she told him. And when I do, her voice trailed off. You'll destroy everything. Izuku finished. Not everything, just all the humans that plague the planet. However, if you agree to relinquish control to me, I may spare your mind, and perhaps spare some of your loved ones, like your mom. What do you say? Do we have a deal? The Herrscher questioned. There was silence between the two. Izuku said nothing. His expression was blank as he kept his head lowered. He had done this. Not only had he let the slime villain go, but he also seemingly released another villain, one far more dangerous. They were right. He wasn't a hero. He was a useless failure. Still, well, the Herrscher questioned. No, the word came out far more firmly than he let it. The thought of her hurting people, killing people, because of him, was not something he would allow. I'm sorry. What was that? She said sternly. I said no, Izuku said as he looked up at the Herrscher. I won't let you use me. I'm not a killer. I'm not a villain. I'm a hero. I will save people, he said defiantly. If there was ever a chance to be a hero, it was now. He had already screwed up so much before. He couldn't screw this up again. Not when there were people's lives on the line. The villainess cocked her head to the side. Her face smile had disappeared and her face was now blank and void of emotion. She floated around him, circling him like a predator, toying with its prey. He could feel her stare drilling into his body. Then she stopped. Izuku braced himself. He expected the villainess to threaten him. Maybe she'd do something to intimidate him and scare him into submission. He didn't think she'd take being denied so well. Most never did. All right then, the woman said as she turned to walk away. She headed to the door before turning back to face him. We'll just do it the long way, then, she told him. I can wait a few months. I hope you can entertain me for that time, or else, she told him as she leaned beside the door. What? Izuku was shocked. He didn't think she'd have left so easily. Wait, this was too easy. Maybe it was a trick. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, the Herrscher said. She didn't need to after all. Izuku wanted to ask why didn't seem enraged, but he didn't get the chance. The front door had been opened and his eyes widened in horror once more. Izuku, I'm home. Inko, his mother, greeted her as she walked inside, with several bags of groceries obscuring her view as she entered the apartment. She had walked straight past the Herrscher, who was still hovering beside the door as it shut closed behind her. Izuku's heart dropped as he saw the Herrscher standing right behind his mom. A sinister grin adorned across her face. Mom, Izuku called out. He had to get his mom's attention. Yet when he saw the Herrscher placing her fingers on her lips, he froze. She hadn't done anything yet. If he made her angry, then ... what if she decided to? Yes, Izuku, Inko called as she looked at her son. He was deathly pale and sweating. Dear, is everything all right? She worriedly asked. No ... it's just, I'm glad to see you're all right. Izuku quickly recovered. Izuku, I only said I'd be gone for a few minutes, Inko told him. The city is in a mess after the Herrscher wrecked it and we need to stock up on supplies in case the worst comes to pass. She warned. I told you this earlier, she reiterated. You did? Izuku questioned before he noticed the Herrscher's subtle gestures. That's when it dawned on him. She had said his body was hers. Did that mean she also controlled him when he was unconscious? The Herrscher mockingly responded with a thumbs up, seemingly aware of what the growing dread on his face meant. Izuku was terrified, to say the least. The Herrscher had pretended to be him, deceived his mother with ease, and none of them were the wiser. It was frightening to think what else she could do while he was unconscious now. Izuku, are you sure everything is okay? Inko asked once more as she turned to carry the groceries in the kitchen. Tell her yes. The Herrscher teleported behind him. I promise, it's the only right answer you have right now. Just another little white lie, on top of all the others you've told her. So Izuku lied, just like he always did when he returned home from school after running into Bakugo and the others. His mom for the most part accepted his answers, but he wonders how much she actually believed his story. Listen, Izuku, I know what happened yesterday must have been a lot to take in. Inko trailed off. It's not every day you hear that. Students from your school are attacked by a villain. And after everything that happened yesterday, I know if you need to take time and process it all, you should. But just remember, if you have anything that's bothering you, anything you need to say, you can come and tell me, all right? And Ko spoke as tears welled up in her eyes. She looked at her son, seeing him all alone and scared. Mom, Izuku tried to speak, but his mom quickly pulled him in for a hug. Izuku, baby, you're all I've got. The thought of losing you, I just can't bear it. She repeated. You have no idea how scared I was when I heard your school was destroyed. You hadn't come home, and I thought I'd lost for sure with all the chaos. Izuku was speechless. His eyes glanced over to the Herrscher. The school was destroyed, he whispered, not sure what to make of that. It was that girl, the Herrscher of the Void. She had destroyed several buildings before she fought All Might. Inko explained. She did. I did. The Herrscher answered simply. You've had some ... bad memories there. So as a gift to you, I erased it. She told him. Consider this a thank you present for releasing me. It's all my fault. Izuku realized. It was all starting to make sense. The slime villain, All Might, the school, and Bakugo. He was frustrated and he had hated it all, and she had used that to her advantage. Izuku, please, don't think like that, Inko told him. None of this is your fault. She consoled him. Oh no, he had slipped up, he realized too late. Now what was he going to say to his mother? How was he going to explain the Herrscher and everything that had happened? Well, you did jump on All Might. You did cause him to lose Slime Villain, so you did technically cause Bakugo to be trapped by the villain. The Herrscher taunted. She wasn't wrong though, loath as he would admit it. Izuku did do all that. So, he confessed it to his mother, leaving out All Might's secret and the Herrscher's involvement, of course. To say Inko was stunned would be an understatement. She merely looked at him as he finished up his explanation. Mom, I slap. Inko for the first time in his life slapped him, and then she immediately regretted it. What is wrong with you? She questioned. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Izuku didn't say anything, too stunned to respond. The Herrscher meanwhile just looked on with mild curiosity at the whole ordeal. It was a response on Inko's part that intrigued her. Izuku's mother paced around the room, walking between him and her, never once acknowledging the Herrscher between her and her son. I know, you've been a fan of All Might. I know you've wanted to be a hero for as long as you can remember, but pulling a stunt like that, Izuku, you could have tired. Did you ever think what could have happened if you had fallen off? Inko scolded. Never mind the slime villain, you could have been hurt or worse. It was fine, Mom. All Might was there, Izuku tried to assure her. Unfortunately for him, that was not the right words to calm her. That doesn't make it better. Inko scolded him. At the end of the day, pro heroes are still just people like you or me. They may have extraordinary power, but they are still people, Izuku. You can't recklessly throw yourselves into danger and expect they'd save you. That's not the right mindset to live with. Look, I'm glad you're safe, but just please don't do that again. Inko sighed. And, I'm sorry I slapped you. Inko apologized. No worries, Mom, I understand, Izuku told her. Good, Inko sighed. I'm going to rest. We have some leftovers in the fridge, Inko told him as she headed to her room, leaving Izuku and the Herrscher alone. The Herrscher glanced at Izuku, taking note where his mother had slapped him. Oh wow, that looks red. The Herrscher chuckled. Has she ever slapped you before? Izuku's eyes widened as he turned to the Herrscher and immediately went on the defensive. No, you stay away from her, he demanded. I won't let you hurt her. Now Izuku, why would I do that? The Herrscher questioned. Do you hate your mother so much that you think I'd kill her for you? She mocked. What? No, I don't hate my mom. Izuku defended. Really? Surely you must have some animosity. She never told you could be a hero, she. And your father probably both had the recessive genes that made you quirkless. It was their fault you were denied your dreams. No, you're wrong, Izuku answered. My mom loves me. She's always loved me, he reaffirmed. Her words did strike a chord in his heart, but he wouldn't let her see it. If you say so. The Herrscher of the Void mused as she floated around the apartment. She didn't feel the need to toy with him further. She was content to end the conversation there for the time being. The boy was still stubborn, but now she had explained his situation and the hopelessness of it all. She would need to get accustomed to this new world of quirks and heroes, but her host seemed to have enough knowledge in his head to help navigate it. He was almost too curious, in fact. She can't actually see you, can she? Izuku asked after he mulled over the recent events in his mind. The Herrscher glanced at him, a slightly amused smile on her lips. All that time, she never once acknowledged your existence in the room. Never seemed to hear or see you. You're right, as expected for such a smart host. The Herrscher praised. No one can see or hear me except for you. Imagine how crazy you must sound, hearing voices that aren't there, seeing a person that no one else sees. It sounds unbelievable, like a ghost story. Tell me, Izuku, are you afraid of ghosts? The Herrscher questioned, dark giggle. Her voice reverberated a little as her body faded out of existence, till eventually she disappeared altogether. Izuku stared at where she vanished. The air still felt heavy, almost suffocating. He glanced around his apartment, looking inside every room. There was no sign of her. A part of Izuku wanted to feel relieved. A more optimistic side wanted to write it off as hysteria. That happened, right? Victims of villain attacks often still felt the effects of it afterward. Maybe he was imagining the whole thing. Maybe the Herrscher wasn't real and it was mind playing tricks on him from yesterday, trying to make some sort of twisted sense of what happened. Or maybe she was real and she was here, just gaslighting him, because that's what villains were, needlessly cruel beings who took pride in the misery of others. Maybe she did the same to him. Yet a small part of Izuku, probably the part the Herrscher had hosted herself, whispered in his ears, in the Herrscher's sweetly dark voice, no, it was real. He had fallen into the void and he wasn't getting out. Nezu and Recovery Girl had left All Might's room. He had wanted to know more, as expected of any hero who took the needs of people first, but they knew they couldn't entertain him much longer. The more they discussed, the more agitated he'd get. They had already tried to limit the information he'd be allowed, hoping that he wouldn't be pressured into continuing further. Still, they locked the doors and had a few of UAS staff keep watch. Do you really think All for One's responsible? Recovery Girl questioned. It was not a topic she liked to think about. The symbol of evil had brought too much grief to her. Even if it isn't, it would be foolish not to think he wouldn't notice, Nezu noted. Quite a few of us have long since expected him to be alive. injured, hopefully, crippled but alive and licking his wounds. He's had quite a lot of time to prepare and plan, Nezu noted. And the girl, recovery girl, wondered. If she has a strong quirk, then's a target for a FO. Can you imagine letting someone with that kind of power go? Nezu noted. Ultimately, no matter how you look at it, I fear things will only be turbulent from here on out. Nezu sighed. What did Night Eye say? Recovery girl questioned. I presume he had more to say than just what the beach. He did, Nezu answered. That fight between All Might and the Herrscher, it ended in a tie. He frowned. She may have fled the scene, but he nearly collapsed from exhaustion. Those media jackals must be having a field day with this. Recovery girl sighed. It never changes. Sir Night Eye definitely believes so, Nezu noted. Just a few days ago, the thought of anyone beating All Might would seem impossible, but yesterday, some random girl did it. Some nobody managed to give the symbol of peace a tough time and then escape, having destroyed and injured several heroes and civilians. Even if it is a draw, it permanently cracks All Might's image. This wasn't some pre-planned attack. Not as far as we know. This wasn't some veteran villain or some large evil organization. This was just one girl who looked around 18, maybe 20 for the oldest, forcing All Might to a stalemate. Now ... you and I know All Might's running out of time. His body is starting to fail, but the public doesn't that. He may have been weakened. He may have been past his limit. He may have been struck in the weak spot. But it all doesn't matter because to the people, it looks like anyone can stand a chance at taking him down. Nezu recalled Night Eye's words. He wants All Might to pick his successor soon and then retire. Nezu iterated. He believes if All Might keeps going the way he is, he'll only destroy himself. That won't work. Yagi is too stubborn. Recovery girl sighed. Yes, but what can we do? Nezu wondered. All Might may not have been defeated, but the idea of the symbol of peace was. Now criminals of all kinds are going to feel bolder, so long as the Herrscher is around. Nezu noted. Not to mention with several heroes injured, some organizations will have to reroute some forces to Musutafu, spreading themselves thin. I can only begin to fathom what this could mean going forward. We'll be ready when it comes. Recovery girl reassured. We always have to be. That's our job as heroes. I hope we are, Nezu muttered. I hope we are. For the rest of the day, Izuku didn't see or hear the Herrscher. She had vanished without a trace, as if she was just a bad dream, or perhaps a living nightmare. He was relieved for the most part, but he still felt a weight on his mind. The heavy atmosphere she had left did not disappear with her, and he was worried she'd return. It still felt like she was here somehow, but that couldn't be true. Right. No matter, he and his mom went about their day, doing chores and cleaning around the apartment, seeing as they had time. Glancing out the windows every now and then, Izuku could feel a pit form in his stomach as he saw the destruction the Herrscher had left in her wake. She was still out there. That much was true. But that didn't mean Izuku would just accept she was a part of him. That was ridiculous after all. Why would such a powerful being want him? He was quirkless. He was positive if she needed a host, she could find loads of other people, maybe even villains with potentially destructive quirks to aid her. It just didn't seem to make sense to him. Thus, the only thing he could properly rationalize was that she was gaslighting him. She was a sadist who saw it funny to mock and tease him. He couldn't do anything to her. That much he knew. He wasn't a threat that needed to be stopped. So perhaps she just takes his misery as entertainment. Well, now that she was gone, he wouldn't let her get to him. She'd probably be who knows where and forgot about him soon anyway. Such was his own unremarkable existence. Eventually, the sun began to set as the day ended. Izuku and his mom prepared dinner and were now enjoying it at the table. How's dinner? Inko questioned as she watched her son take another mouthful of food. It's delicious, Izuku answered in between bites. You really outdid yourself this time. I'm glad you like it. Inko smiled. Izuku had been silent the whole day. Not that she blamed him after what he's been through, but still, she knew he needed time to himself. Still, numerous thoughts lingered in her mind about what had happened to her baby. Mom ... is everything all right? Izuku questioned, noticing her somber look. Oh, it's nothing, dear, just thinking. Inko dismissed. Mom, Izuku repeated. Is something wrong? He asked. Inko sighed. She knew she probably had to talk about this sooner or later. I was just wondering. That's all. About what? Izuku inquired. Izuku, do you hate me? Inko worriedly asked. What? Izuku said in surprise. The Herrscher's words echoed in his mind as he tried to make sense of it. Mom, what are you talking about? What makes you think I hate you? When did I ever say that? Sorry, I didn't mean to imply it like that. Inko corrected. Ever since you met All Might, you were quiet, and then well. She had slapped him for being reckless. He had finally gotten to meet his hero, but he had also gotten his dreams crushed by said hero. Rather than console him, she had slapped him. No, you had every right to be mad, Izuku assured her. It was stupid and dangerous, and I shouldn't have done it. Still, Inko trailed off. Mom ... you have done everything for me, Izuku told her. Probably more than I ever will know. You loved me so much, and you always supported me. He recounted as he walked over to his mom's side. I could never hate you. I would never hate you, Izuku told her as he hugged her. Tears welled up in both of their eyes, before erupting like geysers. The mother and son didn't care. They just took the time to hug and reassure each other. Izuku had spent so many hours watching videos and reading about heroes, but truth be told, his mom still did more for him than any of them. A fact he had so grossly ignored till the Herrscher put it into perspective for him. He may not have powers, but he had his mother, who loved and supported him, and he was grateful for that. Later that night, Izuku wished his mother good night before heading to bed himself. Today had been rather stressful. His encounter with the Herrscher this morning was rather frightful, but thankfully it had come to pass. She was gone now, and he was alone with his own thoughts. He was also feeling much lighter after he spoke with his mom. It was nice. Readying himself to sleep, Izuku put on a white vest and a pair of black shorts and headed to bed. He and his mom would be busy tomorrow and the next few days. Izuku, much like a few other students, would need to search for a new school to attend. There was no way his old middle school was going to be repaired in time, and rather than go through cumbersome online classes, Izuku had told his mother about transferring. It may have also been in part due to the guilt he felt with freeing the Herrscher. He couldn't dare dream about facing his peers and teachers, knowing he was the one responsible for all that. He wasn't even sure how he'd even face Bakugo. Stop thinking these thoughts, he told himself. It was time for bed. He'd go to sleep, get some rest. And then tomorrow was a new day, yeah, a new day. So off to bed he went. Izuku fell asleep not long after he hit the mattress. Then in a few minutes, he began to dream. Simple dreams. He had managed to become a hero despite all odds, and he had even impressed All Might. It was peaceful. Meanwhile, as Izuku dreamt, his body began to stir. Shifting under the sheets, Izuku's hair began to grow, changing from black and green to a snowy white. His body was soon engulfed in energy as his form began to change. Growing, stretching, reshaping itself into something else, someone else. When the energy faded, the Herrscher opened her golden eyes as she awoke. Shigaraki pressed rewind once more on the video player. The young villain was currently relaxing on his couch with nothing more than a bowl of popcorn and some soda. He was all settled to watch his new favorite video. He had aptly called it All Might's most painful facial expressions. I must say, this Herrscher girl isn't a bad player, Shigaraki mused as he watched the fight over. Sure, she didn't get the goal, but she certainly got closer than anyone else he knew. How interested do you think she would be in joining our party? He questioned as he took another mouthful of popcorn. Hard to say. The first issue is finding her, Kurogiri answered. There have been no sightings of her since that fight. Judging from her abilities, it seems she can teleport, so there is no telling where she could be, if she is even in the city to begin with. He noted. HMPH, seems like she went premium. You need to step up your game, Kurogiri, Shigaraki retorted. You have similar powers, yet hers works so much better. He marveled as he watched his favorite part of the clip. All Might smashes himself. The symbol of peace had gone for one of his stupidly named smashes, and the result was hilarious. His fist went into one portal and ended up punching himself in the stomach through another. It was the coolest thing Shigaraki had ever seen. The look of pain on All Might's face was priceless. Oh, how he wished Master could see this. Speaking of Master, has Master given any comment on this? Shigaraki questioned. With such a powerful player, it was natural for a FO to take interest. If anything, Shigaraki expected him to be involved somehow. Maybe he had given her the extra power. Then again, that didn't make sense. Tamura was his apprentice after all. All for One has clarified that the Herrscher isn't his doing, Kurogiri added. She's an entirely separate entity that neither he nor the doctor has been involved in. As such, he is advising you to be very careful in how you'd consider approaching her. I believe he might consider it a worthwhile challenge for you to recruit her. The Warp Gate user explained. Sounds easy enough. Shigaraki hummed. I can't see any reason why she'd decline. May I remind you of the last time you tried to recruit villains? Kurogiri asked. They had it coming, Shigaraki defended. Those insects had no respect, so I taught them some. You decayed them to dust. And they were very respectful before they were completely dusted, Shigaraki noted. Kurogiri just sighed. His charge still had a long way to go. He only hoped Shigaraki's advances on the girl would work far better than it did on the others. Then again, there was a very real possibility the Herrscher might just try to kill him on spot. Maybe Kurogiri should buy Shigaraki some books on how to impress the other sex. He certainly had doubted his charge had experience in that area. Still too weak. The Herrscher grimaced as she glanced down at her hands. She wiggled her fingers back and forth as she examined her new body. It took quite a bit of power to change her host completely, but in her mind, it was worth it. She was not about to walk this world in such a weak human male's body. She was grateful, though. It was almost ironic. Izuku had been so adamant at first about not letting her take over, yet he underestimated if she was even there to begin with. He wrote her actions off as just a lie meant to scare him and let his guard, and she took over even easier now. She could still feel him, though. It was a heaviness in her mind. His presence, his consciousness and subconsciousness were still with her, only sleeping, relaxing in the land of dreams. She knew better than to risk waking him though. Let him sleep for now. Removing the covers, she got out of Izuku's bed. It had almost caught her off guard how cold the floor had been beneath her bare feet. She hadn't reformed her outfit, not really seeing the need. In her current state, it was best to conserve as her strength till it was needed. Standing up, she walked over to the nearest mirror she could find and examined herself properly. She had gotten all the details from her old body for the most part. She had transformed Izuku into an almost perfect replica of K423. With long white hair, slender but toned limbs, a well-developed figure, and flawless skin. If you looked at them, you'd never expect Izuku and her to be the same person, except for the clothes. Though she had certainly stretched his vest a bit, there was only one small problem. It still can't handle it. She frowned. Just because she could make the physical form identical, she couldn't exactly do the same for Izuku's Honkai adaptability. As it stood, if she tried to rampage like she did earlier, heck, if she tried to cause another eruption, she'd burn out her vessel. She grits her teeth in annoyance as she clenches her fist. She was half tempted to strike the mirror, but restrained herself. It would do her no good to get angry now. This body was weak, it was pathetic, it couldn't handle her power. She had overestimated it yesterday. She had only realized it too late when she had started feeling sick during her fight with the blonde buffoon. The worst part of all ... it was the only choice she had. She looked around Izuku's room, taking note of all the posters he had. It was akin to a shrine, though instead of a god, he worshipped heroes. She could see why. This world was different. It was littered with quirks, superpowers almost every human seemed to have. Every human except Izuku. Logically, it should have meant she would have had an easier time finding a good host. Just look for a strong quirked human and take their body. It sounded easy enough, except she couldn't. For whatever reason, any human with a quirk who touched her core died. She wasn't even actively killing them either. So, with no other options, she was now stuck with Izuku Midoriya as her host. Loath as she would to admit it. Even worse, she couldn't just kill him like she could have done with Kiana, lest she ran the risk of permanently ruining their body due to its low resistance. All in all, she was stuck. Her host was too weak to let her use her full power, and she was not confident enough in her knowledge to immediately resume her plans for destruction. She had lost far too many times from being overconfident and underestimating her opponents. Siegfried, Heimko, and Kiana had been proof that she wasn't infallible. Grrrrrr. The Herrscher frowned once more as she placed a hand on her stomach. She needed some more sustenance. She left Izuku's room and made her way to the kitchen. She recalled exactly where she had seen the Midoriya keep their food and began to prepare the only meal she knew, cup ramen. After taking out the cup and putting on the kettle to boil, the Herrscher found herself exploring the rest of the apartment. She took note of the family picture on one of the tables. It should be a nice small family, Izuku, with his mom and his father. She didn't recall hearing mention of a dad. He was probably deceased or gone from their lives, so she didn't bother too much on it. Instead, her eyes focused on Inko, her host's mother, and the only major obstacle she had really to taking over Izuku. Inko, from what the Herrscher had gathered, was Izuku's rock. She was his mental foundation, the only seemingly positive influence in his life. She'd be the one who needed to go if Izuku was to fall to her. She'd be the one who needs. Walking back to the kitchen, the Herrscher found a knife on the counter. A lance may have been a better choice, but it was still a waste of power if Inko was a weak human. The Herrscher made her way to Inko's room with the knife in hand. Opening the door ever so slightly, the Herrscher's shadow was cast over Inko's as she approached her. The Herrscher took note of Inko's sleeping figure, her back facing the Herrscher. It would be so easy right now to simply impale her. One strike and it would be over. Inko would be removed from the picture ... just like Heimko. Just like Heimko. The Herrscher froze. Just like Heimko. The Herrscher swore under her breath, quickly covering her mouth when she realized the mistake she made. Inko's body shifted, and the Herrscher immediately hid the knife. When Inko turned around, she was surprised at what she found. "What are you doing here, Izuku?" Inko questioned as she rubbed her eyes. Izuku chuckled nervously as he scratched behind his head. "Sorry, Mom. I was having a midnight snack and then I heard a noise, so I came to check on you. Sorry for waking you up." Izuku apologized. "That's quite all right, dear," Inko said as she went back to bed. "Just make sure you clean up when you're done." She yawned as she huddled back up into bed. "All right, Mom," Izuku answered as he turned and headed out the door. "I love you, sweetie," Inko called out as she fell asleep. Izuku froze by the door when he heard the words. Turning his head back, he noticed how his mom had already closed her eyes. "Yeah, I love you too, Mom," Izuku answered as he left the room and quietly shut the door. They didn't see it, but Inko smiled when she heard those words. Once outside, the Herrscher rubbed her temples as she grimaced at her lapse in judgment. Killing Inko would have been the worst move she could have made. Last time she killed one of her host's loved ones, which only motivated them to rebel more and made them more troublesome to deal with. The Herrscher wasn't going to risk it this time. She returned the knife to its place before heading back to her noodles. She really needed to slow down and properly assess her situation. She had almost been too hasty back then and would have made another major mistake had she not caught herself. She couldn't afford to be so careless. Izuku's mind had gently stirred when Inko had spoken to her. The Herrscher didn't like that. It meant his subconscious was still active. When she had awakened for yesterday, she had forced him into sleep, but she still felt him. It was like a ball on a chain for her. She had tried to indulge herself and slaughter humans, but any conscious act to do so was hidden. She really had to push for it, to overwhelm his heroic drive, and even then that backfired on her. Blasted heroes, she swore. First, it had to be her, that foolish Kiana, getting help from the darn bird to suppress her. Now it was this quirkless brat. It seems she was fated to always get stuck with naive heroes who just couldn't see the ugly truth. What to do? What to do? The Herrscher mused as she munched on her noodles. This world was getting more and more frustrating. Still, she knew she needed to figure out some way to handle it. She had failed to destroy humanity before. She wasn't going to fail again. She mulled it over, and in the end, she could only think of one long-term solution. Just wait Izuku out. It wasn't her most flashy of ideas. It was certainly going to be the one with the least bloodshed possible and be the longest and potentially most boring plan. But it could work. All she had to do was wait for Izuku to snap. Wait for him to have a bad day and just guide him along the right path and snuff out what remaining light he had. Izuku was already discriminated by so many people for his status. He was regularly abused by his peers. He could not stand injustice. He was frequently a target for bullying, insults, and scorn. He was soft. He had no confidence in himself, try as he might. By all accounts, he would be easy to break. After all, how firm could his will possibly be? Izuku Midoriya's heroic resolve couldn't be that strong, right? I'll be working late tonight, Inko informed her son as she packed her purse. Make sure you're back before sundown and lock the doors, she instructed. Got it, Mom, Izuku answered, as he also prepared himself. Maybe he'd stop and see if there were any interesting books to read, or any new magazines or hero merch available. He needed something to take his mind off recent events. He was also feeling cooped up for the past few days. It was time to get some fresh air, and hopefully he could also figure out what to do next, both concerning schooling and his future going forward. For the past few days, they had been going back and forth with what school he should transfer to. In the end, they decided to wait for a short bit. His plan was simply to see what school Bakugo chose and make sure his choice was on the other side of town. Considering Bakugo was being treated by some of the best doctors, no small part thanks to All Might, though Izuku couldn't mention that out loud as his mom had told him it in secret after Bakugo's mom told her. Although in hindsight it could also be a good story to help take the heat off All Might. While Izuku didn't doubt his hero's intentions, the media had not been kind following the Herrscher fiasco. Izuku had tried to forget about his encounter with the Herrscher, but he just couldn't. It was hard when she seemed to be the talk of the town. He understood why, but that didn't mean he enjoyed seeing her face appearing on every news outlet on the web. He could have sworn that the images were now looking at him, and Izuku was sure he had heard her voice laughing in his head now and then. It was troubling for the young boy. The villain had only met him once, but she had left quite an impression, even more so than the slime villain. The Herrscher hadn't tried to kill him. Quite ironically, she hadn't even hurt him. She scared him, but that was it. She didn't do more than spout her creepy and frightening threats. So why was she still haunting him, when the villain who had nearly suffocated and choked him didn't? Maybe it was because she was a pretty girl. Izuku shook his head, trying to remove those thoughts. The Herrscher was a villain. He shouldn't be thinking like that. Yet for some reason, Izuku was dreaming about her. Dreaming about her being in his house, eating in his room, lying down on his bed, bathing in his shower. Most unsettling of all, he had dreamt the Herrscher standing by his mother's bed, with a knife in hand. It terrified him, how frequently she was appearing in his dreams. Her words still echoed to him. Your body, mind, soul, they are all mine now, she had told him. He had thought she was being dramatic, but the way she appeared in his dreams, it was so vivid. Elsewhere, this is a nice change of pace, isn't it? Recovery Girl smiled as she looked around the area. She and her patient were currently relaxing on a bench just outside her office, enjoying the fresh air outside. When you said I was ready to leave my bed, I didn't think you meant to come and sit around. Yagi sighed as he leaned back. I thought you'd clear me to get back to work. Oh please, you've been working non-stop, Recovery Girl scolded. Not true, I didn't leave the ward until today, Yagi defended. The response he received was a light tap on the head with the elder lady's cane. That may be true, but you haven't exactly been resting, Chio noted with a sigh. It was to be expected. How else would All Might be the #1 hero if he didn't work diligently? That said, he needed to learn more self-control. You've been going over any lead, report, or news footage you could get your hands on. She grumbled. Rather than working your body, you're overtaxing your mind. It was just light reading. All Might defended. Yagi, Chiyo warned. If you overexert yourself, you'll recover even slower. Besides, you should leave all the research stuff to the others. She warned. Come on, Chiyo, you know how it is. I can't just sit still and do nothing. Yagi complained. Resting isn't doing nothing. The nurse pointed out. As it stands, you're still the strongest hero around. Ensuring you are healthy and ready to go is a must. Yes, I know. Then stop being difficult and relax. Take in the sights. Get some fresh air. Chiyo scolded. You won't be a hero forever. One day you'll retire. And when you do, you'll need to learn to relax. She pointed out. I see ... So that's what this is about. Night I put you up to this. All Might accused. He wants you to convince me to retire and choose a successor. He tried, but I told him no. Chiyo dismissed. You'll retire when you either can't keep up mentally or you physically can't keep going. As for a successor, while I don't doubt Night Eye's judgment, I know very well that a successor is someone who you will personally want to choose. I've considered retirement myself. Recovery Girl noted. However, I, much like you, am very strict. I don't just want someone who has the same qualifications or a good healing quirk. I want to know that they truly share and hold my values. The one who comes after me must not only understand what I did but also why. They don't need to be the second Recovery Girl, but they just need to embody the same ideals. Well, it's nice to know someone gets me. All Might chuckled. Oh, believe me, we all understand you, Chiyo admitted. It's just we worry that you'll do something reckless and get yourself hurt or worse. Night Eye in particular wouldn't have been this eager if you didn't crawl out of your hospital bed and go rushing to work while still injured. However, just as they were talking, Recovery Girl's phone went off. Without hesitation, the pro hero took it out and checked. Oh my, she gasped. There was a major villain attack on the other side of the city. Numerous pros had already mobilized to go and solve it. Upon relaying the information, All Might was ready to bulk and leap across town, but Recovery Girl stopped him. They've got this, Recovery Girl told him. She sincerely hoped it was true. She knew All Might was always the number one choice, but you had to leave it to others at times. Fine, All Might grumbled. But if it escalates, you let me go. Fine, Chiyo noted. He'd leave either way. There was no use in arguing. He was a hero after all. She just hoped it didn't reach that point. Izuku felt dazed. He had finished up most of his errands for his mom and was just grabbing a bite to eat at a cafe. The next thing he knew, a car had been flung through the window. He coughed as dust was thrown up everywhere. People were panicking and screaming outside. A lot of people were already leaving the cafe and joining the masses in panic. It was amusing. No, not amusing, it was horrible. Izuku shook his head. He hurried to leave as well. However, when he was at the door, he heard something he couldn't refuse. Help me, a kid called. Izuku's eyes widened as he looked back. A kid had gotten stuck under some nearby rubble. Instinctively, he rushed to aid the kid. Don't worry, I'm here, he told the kid as he hurried back to help them. He hurriedly started to dig through the rubble. Much to his relief, the kid hadn't been seriously hurt and he was able to clear everything away easily. He could have sworn he heard someone scoff at this. Izuku didn't mind. Taking the kid up in his arms, Izuku was about to run to the exit when he heard a cracking. He froze, looking around while he tried to identify the sound, and that's when he noticed it. Oh no, he muttered as he saw the cracks begin to form in the ceiling. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was going to happen next. Rushing forward, Izuku used all the strength he had and threw the kid out of the window. The child may get some bruises, but that was better than. The ceiling collapsed. Izuku wasn't fast enough and he found himself buried under the rubble, not unlike the child from earlier. This was far more than before, and Izuku could only look in horror as he was trapped in the darkness, alone and with it crushing him slowly. He prayed and hoped whatever hero was out there that they would come and save him before it was too late. He was scared. He didn't want to die. Yet at this point, that was all he could expect with the pain he felt. His body was squashed under the concrete. His bones and organs were being compressed against his will. Well, at least he did some good. He'd die helping a kid. That must have counted for something, right? That's your dying thought. A familiar voice echoed in his mind. Izuku blinked in the darkness as two familiar glowing golden eyes appeared before him. Seriously? Wait a second. Herrscher of the Void. Izuku realized. What is she doing here? Watching the life slowly leave your body. She answered. I must say it was far more disappointing than I thought it would be. You're dying and the only thing you can think of is how you saved that insect. She told him. Pathetic. Izuku didn't say anything, too dumbfounded by her response and her behavior. It disturbed him how casual she was about his imminent death and how dismissive she was of his actions. Surprisingly, though, he hadn't anticipated what her next few words would be. Nevertheless, you'll have ample time to reconsider your dying words when I get us out here, she informed. Wait, that can't be right. Did she say she was getting him out of there? Why would she do that? I told you, Izuku. You're my host. Your body is mine. Ergo it is in my best interest to keep it alive, so that I may also remain alive. She explained. Wait, you were serious about that? I swear, you're a bigger idiota than Kiana ever was. The Herrscher muttered under her breath. You know what, let me not waste my breath. I'll just show you instead. The Herrscher announced. Show me wa. Izuku stopped mid-sentence as his body from what little he could feel frozen in place. He had been immobilized before but now he couldn't move at all. He couldn't feel his fingers, his toes, even his tongue and eyes weren't obeying them. Suddenly Izuku felt his body move once more. No, moving was not the correct word. It was more like something was happening to him. He could feel his body begin to grow and shift, parts of himself seemingly conforming and moving, shifting the rubble around him. Much better, the Herrscher commented. Before Izuku knew what was going on, he felt the floor suddenly disappear beneath him as he was pushed down by the rubble, a bright light suddenly enveloping his view as he found himself staggering forward. He was lying down right then why was he now standing up? Wait, Izuku looked forward. He could only look forward, but he could recognize it enough. He was on the roof. He was on the roof opposite the cafe. He could hear the people screaming and running. He could hear everything. He was outside. He was saved. A hero had saved him. It's surprising how naive you are, Izuku spoke. No, that wasn't right. Izuku didn't say that. That wasn't his voice. Yet he felt it. He felt his lips move. No, that's not it. It wasn't his lips. They were on his face. He could feel them, but they weren't his. They were foreign. His whole body felt foreign to him. Then it clicked on him. Izuku felt his and the Herrscher's lips begin to curl into a smile. Finally, she chuckled. He finally realized the situation. They'll think she's one of my creations, All for One pointed out as he lay on the hospital bed. It was one of his routine checkups with his personal doctor, and naturally, the two couldn't help but talk about recent events, specifically the fresh blood in town, All Might and his allies. The doctor wondered. They probably will. From what little investigating I've done, I can't seem to pinpoint any singular quirk that could give such a variety in abilities. He noted. Do you have any theories as to why? As far as we know, aren't you the only one with the technology and the means to extract, duplicate, and graft quirks? Or do you think some other group can develop that technology? I wouldn't put out of the realm of possibility. There are many cases when different individuals created the same inventions at different locations and times but without ever learning of each other. The doctor explained. I see. All for One mused. Then that could be problematic. For decades, All for One has held control of the criminal underworld through his quirk, the rarest and arguably most powerful one of all. The ability to take and give quirks, All for One. It was what let him control the flow of power, stealing quirks from those that opposed him, and granting quirks to his followers in exchange for loyalty. For someone else to now possess such an ability, All for One clenched his fist. We need to find out just where she came from and how she attained such power. The villain noted. Perhaps she merely has a powerful quirk, in which case that could be more than useful, but if she has someone else backing her, then we need to find them and destroy them. All for One explained. If that fight was anything to go by, then there was a very likely, very real chance that should the Herrscher grow stronger, or should there be any beings like her, there is a very real chance they could kill All Might and permanently destroy One for All. The destruction of One for All was not something he could allow. What is your plan, Master? The doctor questioned. How is the progress on the Namu project? All for One questioned. I've managed to stabilize the additional quirks within the current prototypes, the doctor informed. However, for the most part, these Nomas initially had similar quirks to the ones I implemented. Very few can seem to hold completely different quirks, and even then there are some unforeseen side effects. I see. All for One noted. Have any of them taken to the shock absorption quirk? He questioned. So far only one has held on with shock absorption. I am currently working to see if I can incorporate the strength quirks you requested as well as a regeneration one. Very well. All for One told him. We will need to gather more info on our new adversary. If it is possible, I would also like you to look into designing a counter for our new obstacle. Should she become too problematic, then we will need a means to wear her down and either remove her as a threat or submit her to our will. He instructed. Very well, the doctor answered. After discussing a few more points, the doctor finished checking up on the villain. He bid his master farewell and left to resume his work on the Nomas. All for One was left alone with his thoughts. There shouldn't be anyone else with this ability. His ability to take and give quirks was his power and his alone. He had granted it to the doctor as a reward for his loyalty and as a means to continue his work. No one else should wield it. He'd need to find whoever had managed to copy his ability and exterminate them. There was only room in this world for Demon King after all. Izuku felt terror like had never felt before. He was now a prisoner trapped in his own body that had been warped into that of the Herrscher. He couldn't move a muscle, not unless she commanded it. He could hear, he could smell, he could taste, he could see, and he could feel everything around him. Yet he could do nothing at all. Every move was dictated by the Herrscher. Why are you doing this? He thought. He had so many questions running through his mind right now. It was tempting to let you pass out. The Herrscher noted as she folded her arms under her chest. Normally I'd let you go unconscious and then take over, but given the situation, I couldn't tell if you'd die first or not. She noted. It was the safer bet to save you. So now what? What are you planning to do now that you have control? He questioned the Herrscher. I think we should head home soon. The Herrscher noted. The humans seem to be destroying themselves just fine without my involvement. She chuckled as she watched the civilians run from the villains. You aren't working with the villains? Izuku realized. You dare assume I'd associate with that filth? The Herrscher growled. She was offended he'd even think she'd be aligned with such disgusting creatures. She had more self-respect than that. She glanced down at the villains, feeling utterly repulsed by them. There were 3 villains, and they each had unique and grotesque abilities. One was a man whose main power seemed to be extending and manipulating his teeth. Another was green and chubby, like a giant gummy bear, with the power to eat any matter and spit out energy projectiles. The last one, a seemingly thin pale yellow man, seemed to consume large quantities of water, filling up like a balloon, and then proceeded to spit out a highly corrosive acid. In short, the entire villain group seems to have the common theme of their powers being related to their mouths. 2/3 of them were upchucking something they consumed. How her host thought her elegant and divine nature was akin to them, she couldn't fathom. Nevertheless, the villains, if she'd even call them that, was amusing enough. It was nice watching the little insects flee in terror. Even better when she didn't have to do it herself. Unfortunately, her host didn't share the same sentiments. You have to do something, he pleaded with the Herrscher. You can't just leave those people down there. He told her. It was a fool's errand. He knew that much, but he had to try. Maybe if could convince her to at least save one person at least. The Herrscher rolled their eyes as she placed her hands on her hips. Why would I ever do that? She questioned. In case you forgot, I want to see humanity destroyed. If you want a heroic Herrscher, try finding another one, preferably an Idiaka one. The Herrscher dismissed. But, silence. The Herrscher snapped as she resumed watching. She tried to enjoy it, savor the misery of the people running in fear, but she couldn't. She could quite feel enjoyment from it. However, she could feel a growing irritation inside her being as she watched on. This is wrong, Izuku whispered. At the very least you shouldn't be taking joy in all this suffering. He argued. It felt disgusted to him, to watch these people suffer, to feel the Herrscher's satisfaction at seeing it all. You don't seem to think the same way when you watch your heroes. The Herrscher responded. What? You heard me, Izuku. I've been watching how your world portrays its version of heroes and villains. It mostly resolves in 2 super-powered humans fighting and the media simply picking a side to support. She scoffed. That's not true. Being heroes is about saving people. Izuku argued. That's what separates them. Is it? Why is there so much coverage focused on the power of heroes and how they can beat others? Why are some of the top videos all about hero versus villain fights? Why is it people like Bakugo, who are nothing but cruel and abusive to you, are seen as having the potential to be really good heroes? Izuku was silent. He should have had a simple answer to her retort, an answer to defend Bakugo. It's because of his amazing quirk, he thought. He wanted to hide away that thought, but the Herrscher still heard it. She was listening specifically to hear him admit it. So that's your answer. You think just because he has such amazing power and drive, he can be a hero. If that's the case, then by all accounts I am a hero. Maybe that's why you think so, but I know very well I'm not. If people like Bakugo are what you define heroes as being, then humanity here is no different than it was back then. The Herrscher noted that she saw the villains overpowering the people with rhyme or reason as to why they did. Why are you so interested in it? You seem to hate humanity so much, so why are you still involving yourself with it? Why can't we just leave? Izuku shouted in his mind. Oh, but that's just it. We love to see the things we hate get destroyed. The Herrscher smiled maliciously. That's common for any being. And I'll gladly share my love with you. She mocked as she focused her eyes on the people being injured. People who were starting to bleed, who were at the mercy of the villains. No, Izuku gasped as he saw the villains ready to strike. The acid user was ingesting a lot of water, and the people on the ground were right in its path. Izuku wished he wouldn't see it. He wished more than anything that if anything horrible was going to happen, he wouldn't see it. He got his wish. The Herrscher's eyes closed before him, throwing his entire world into darkness. Believe me, this isn't going to be any better. The Herrscher noted. I'd argue it's even worse when you don't see it, because your mind can craft even worse horrors you can imagine to fill in the awe. The Herrscher's body was doused in liquid, catching her off guard. Before she could even recover, Izuku shrieked in pain. Their body felt like it was on fire, like the Herrscher's skin was being eaten away by the liquid itself. Her eyes snapped open as she looked for the source, trying to ignore both her pain and Izuku's annoying screams of agony. The Herrscher clutched her head. She tried to focus, but Izuku's screams were driving her crazy. Who dares? She questioned as she looked around. Herrscher, Izuku pleaded. The Herrscher grimaced at her host's useless antics, feeling tears forming in her host's eyes. She tried to remove the acid on her face. Her vision was initially very blurry, but gradually she was able to see clearer, and as she did, her fury rose. Her teeth grit as she tensed her body, clenching her fists in rage. Whoever did this, make it stop, please, make it stop. Izuku continued to beg. She intended to stop this pain. Seriously, couldn't her host keep it down? This reminded her of the children back in Babylon. All the children whose screams still lived on her head, and the burning sensations caused by the honkai injected into their veins. She despised those memories. They reminded me of the pathetic helpless being who was taken and broken, all for humanity's benefit. She will break whoever thought they could drag her mind back to that place. The Herrscher scanned the area before it fell on the source, the one who ignited her fury. She narrowed them on her target. Her rage swallowed the feelings of pain and replaced them with bloodlust. You, she growled venomously as she stared at the acid spitter and his allies. So, he and the other villains dared to attack her, even after she had left them be. Typical humans. Well, my host, I changed my mind. Looks like I will do something about these villains. The Herrscher hovered into the air, looking down at her enemies. She hadn't intended to get involved. She was still trying to conserve power, but if they were looking for a fight, I'll grant their death wishes. She spat. Arrogant pests. Kai sneered as he looked up at the monitor. The Yakuza leader was feeling especially aggravated today. Another villain outbreak had appeared in their territory. These were becoming troublesome day after day. It was the fifth one this week. What is the status of the attack site? He questioned one of his subordinates. Our estimated guess is that most of those businesses in the area will need to shut down or be moved elsewhere to continue operating. We will also need to look for replacing staff for a few who might be killed. The subordinate answered. We need to look at speeding up our research on our cure then, Kai noted. These wretched quirk users have been bothersome long enough. Yes, sir. You are dismissed, Kai told him as the subordinate left. He resumed watching the fight, trying to assess what was the best solution for this problem. For the time being, he'd make sure to take note of the villains. Once this was over, he'd see about personally punishing them for intruding on his territory. Perhaps he could use them as the first set of trial tests for his quirk-erasing bullets. It would be fitting. He'd deal with two birds with one stone. All things considered, he'd need to ensure his bullets do the job as intended. The last thing he needed was to get involved with All for One, or All Might'nt get way over his head. The greatest hero and the greatest villain were the two most well-known symptoms of the much larger disease of quirks. In his line of work, it was always wise to stay under All Might's radar and stay within All for One's good graces. Still, he wasn't going to just sit by and remain there. He had promised his boss he'd return the Yakuza to its former glory, and he intended to do so. He'd topple these gods, no matter the cost. And once they were out of the picture, he'd move to rid the world of all its heroes and villains. Then there'd be no one left to challenge them. Not Endeavor, not the Hero Society, and certainly not the Metal Liberation Army. Not even the Herrscher, he noted as he saw the figure appear on the monitor. The Yakuza boss looked intrigued by the new villain's appearance. She hadn't been seen since All Might's clash. It seems she had decided to make an appearance today. Oh joy, just what he needed, another villain destroying his territory. Well, he might as well get what data he could on her. Moonfish was drooling on himself. He had finally been able to quell his desire for flesh these past few days. With many of those pesky heroes out, nothing was going to stop him now. He even had help collecting his food now. Spitter could soften them up, while Devo would just tenderize them. Even now he was going to indulge himself when he saw a nice small-sized morsel running around. He wasn't worried, he'd catch them soon enough. Reeling back his head, he launched his teeth forward, extending them with ease as they surged at the little delicacy. His teeth were just about to pierce his prey. Snap! The space next to him exploded, throwing him to the side. He growled animalistically as he turned to find the culprit, the one who had gotten in between him and his meal. That's when he saw her, the most delicious-looking treat before his eyes. She was a little skinny, not as much meat as any other. The villain didn't mind. He was sure the flavor would more than make up for it. If anything, her flesh smelled very delicious, very exotic. He'd definitely take the first bite before the others realized it. The Herrscher of the Void scowled as she stared at the villain before her. She still felt the acid burning her body, so she'd finish this quickly. Stretching out her hand, she pulled the villain toward her, suspending him in midair. She heard him struggling to free himself from her hold, a pointless endeavor. He wrenched his head back and launched his teeth at her. Several, long, sharp, powerful blades emerged from his mouth, all lunging towards the Herrscher. She hummed softly as a portal opened in front of her, taking all the teeth in. She was left completely unharmed. G.A.H. Moonfish gasped as a fresh scent of blood touched his nose. He felt something warm begin to flow down his chest. He tried to look down, forcefully bending his neck forward, while manipulating his teeth. His eyes widened. He had been stabbed, impaled even ... by his own teeth. Behind the villain, another portal had opened, the exit for the first one. The teeth he had launched at the Herrscher were now in him. The villain felt faint, his world starting to darken. The Herrscher slid the portal up to the villain's mouth and snapped it shut, severing the villain's teeth. She then unceremoniously dropped him on the ground. His blood pooled out of his body. Moonfish, the other villains said in shock as they saw their comrade fall. They would have rushed to his side if they didn't feel the murderous aura emitting from his killer. Wretched humans, your existence is a mistake, a sin to this world, the Herrscher said coldly as she walked slowly towards them. The villains, wisely, decided to turn around and run for their lives. No, the Herrscher commanded as a giant purple block wall appeared trapping them with the Herrscher. Panic set into the villains as their hearts began to race. They had no way out of this. They turned to find themselves faced with the Herrscher, who smiled sadistically at them. Spitter decided to continue trying to escape, ingesting what water he had remaining from a broken fire hydrant and trying to melt the wall. DeVoe, on the other hand, decided to try fighting to the end. Opening his mouth, the villain launched several tendrils that grabbed debris and pulled into his mouth. He chewed it up vigorously before spitting out an energized projectile at the Herrscher. She dodged it and then flicked her wrist to him. A white lance materialized beside her and was launched at the villain at high speed. He reacted in time by opening up his mouth and ingesting the weapon before sending it back at her. The Herrscher looked surprised at seeing her attack be redirected, but nevertheless, she was able to easily avoid being struck by her own lance. The villain then resumed launching more projectiles at her, grabbing whatever he could. He ate manhole covers, mailbox, broken car doors, concrete blocks, severed limbs, a squirming man, anything he could eat, he devoured and launched at the Herrscher. He'd hit her eventually, right? Enough, the Herrscher said as blocked the last projectile with a cube, a smaller one than the wall behind the villains. She then sent the cube forward, shrinking its size and accelerating its velocity. DeVoe opened his mouth and swallowed the cube. He was prepared to fire it back. He prepared himself to launch and then, nothing. He panicked as she tried to force the cube out, but it didn't budge. Wait ... why did it feel bigger than when he ate it? It was then did he realized his mistake, when he saw the Herrscher smirking at him. Die, the Herrscher ordered as she opened her hand. The cube began to expand in irregular ways. Soon it had become much, much larger than DeVoe. 2 down, 1 to go. The Herrscher turned her attention to the acid villain who was still trying to escape. Mercy, mercy, the villain pleaded with the Herrscher. She laughed at his foolishness. She had none. Realizing his position, Spitter too decided to fight to the end. However, unlike his colleagues, he was dealt with far less gently. The villain spewed more streams of acid, but the Herrscher dodged with ease, collecting all the acid inside her portals. She then pulled the wall, bringing the villain closer as she started to hover in the air. Once airborne, she summoned 3 more walls, boxing the acid villain as she hovered out of her newly made box. Inside the box, the villain tried everything he could, spewing acid to melt the walls, but nothing worked. With no way to go but down, he tried melting the floor in a vain attempt to probably find a sewer. To his credit, the ground did give way ... but only to reveal a floor made of the same energy as the walls around. Even worse, the acid was all pooling on the floor around him. Realizing what was happening, the villain stopped spewing, but it was already too late. He looked up at the Herrscher, who quickened the wall's movement, trapping the villain in an ever-shrinking box. It had once been the size of the street, but now it was reduced to no bigger than a bus and shrinking even faster. Here's a housewarming gift, a soothing plunge to die for, the Herrscher taunted as she opened a portal above. And all the acid he had spewed at her earlier that she had collected flooded the prison, filling it even more. Once the portals were empty, she closed the portals and formed a lid on top of the box, sealing it on all sides. The Herrscher then clenched her fist shut, immediately compressing the box, the villain, and the acid she left inside it. She could hear his delightful screams. She'd almost enjoy it as well if she wasn't still in pain from her acid burns and Izuku's scream. Once finished, she looked at the remains of the villains. She was satisfied her enemies were dead. Vengeance now was hers, with only the remaining humans scrambling under the rubble or with their injuries. The Herrscher decided she'd wasted enough time and to leave before any heroes showed up. She still had to remove the acid that had burned her body, soaking into her skin and clothes. It still was eating away at her. Her rage had initially dulled the pain, just like it always did, but now that her anger was satisfied, it returned, and both the pain and Izuku's annoying screams were brought back to the forefront of her mind. She rubbed her temples. Her host was still too weak, annoyingly so. She'd need to do something about that. She was fine with him being easy to scare, but him crying and whining so much was grating her nerves. How was it did he had enough willpower to keep her at bay again? Never mind, she'd figure it out later. She opened a portal and soon headed back to the apartment. How intriguing, Kai noted. The Herrscher had taken care of his little problem. Granted, she had still caused some more destruction, but it was still minor compared to other villains. and still far less than what she had done before. She had impressed him, 3 villains all beaten within a few minutes. She was as dangerous as the reports had indicated, if not also efficient. He'd need to keep tabs on her. His phone suddenly started to ring. Kai glanced at the number. He rolled his eyes at who it was calling. Switching off the monitor, he took the call. "Quite the show, isn't it, Overhaul?" A voice taunted. "Sorry to hear about your loss. What do you want, Redistro?" Kai cut off. He was not in the mood for formalities. He was still irked by the villain's attack, and he didn't someone else mocking him for it. "I need a new shipment of trigger," Redistro commented. "I've been told you've gotten into the business recently. Seems like you've finally come around to seeing the value in quirks." "You're delusional," Overhaul answers. "My goal is still the same." "Well, at least you have conviction. That said, I do know you're lacking in funds right now. Quite a lot of your territories have been hit," Redistro noted. "I don't suppose you know anything about that?" Kai growled. "No, if it was me I'd let you know personally," Redistro answered. "I've been preoccupied with other things as of late, but I'm willing to do business with you, considering your current state of affairs. Do we have a deal?" Redistro noted. "Fine," Kai answered. Upon arriving inside the apartment, the Herrscher glanced around, making sure she was alone and that there were no open windows or doors. "Hey, insect, have you stopped crying like a baby yet?" the Herrscher muttered to her host. As tempting as it was to just leave him as is, she didn't trust that Inko wouldn't notice something off with her son. The Herrscher needed to make sure he was at least capable enough to look normal. "Herrscher," Izuku whispered weakly. It was the first coherent sentence she heard from him that wasn't related to acid burns. "Where are we?" "Home," she answered. "I'm going to give your body back now, so shut up and dry your tears. The last thing we want is your mom getting a heart attack if she finds out what happened," the Herrscher commented. There was no doubt in her mind that Inko would be hesitant to leave her son's side after, which would make any attempts at control far harder in the long run. It was best to keep them separate for now. "Okay," Izuku answered. The Herrscher's body was engulfed in a soft light before it shrank and reshaped itself into Izuku's form. "I'm free," Izuku sighed. "For now," the Herrscher corrected. Izuku breathed heavily as he fell to the floor on his knees. He was both mentally and emotionally exhausted from his experience. On top of that, the Herrscher's use had also left his body feeling even weaker than before. He could barely muster the strength to stand back up. But his issues didn't stop there. "What the, Izuku?" the Herrscher questioned. She felt a tingling sensation start to emit on his skin. "Something's wrong," Izuku gasped as he saw his skin start to smoke. He felt his flesh start to burn even more than before. Oh, he started to scream. Herrscher. That filthy worm, the Herrscher realized. She had underestimated the potency of the acid. It had remained on her skin and by extension Izuku's. She quickly grabbed what control Izuku was still willing to give, regaining her form. The acid was far less effective on her. No, that wasn't the right assumption. It was just easier for her body to heal off the burns. That didn't mean the acid wasn't on her anymore, just stuck on the surface of her skin. "What happened?" Izuku questioned softly. "We need to shower," the Herrscher told him as she hurried out of the room. "Wait, what?" Izuku questioned in surprise. Did he hear that right? All Might glanced around at the scene. He should have been quicker. The villains had already been dealt with, but the damage was already done. All that he could do now was try and help. He approached the firefighters and the other public service units and humbly asked for how could assist before they pointed him where his strength would be needed. The stench of the acid was very potent, even more so with what it had dissolved. It was a truly horrible sight to behold. "What happened to the heroes?" All Might asked a worker from the shops. "They tried to stop them, but..." The young man pointed to one such puddle that had the remains of what looked like a pro-hero costume. Not too far away was another individual partially buried beneath rubble, blood oozing at the side. After tending to the worker, All Might hurried and cleared the rubble of the hero. His heart dropped at what he saw. "Oh no," he gasped. He called for a medic immediately. Much to his relief, they came and took the fallen hero, who was unconscious but still very much alive. It was a small victory on their part, one less death. All Might stayed helping the disaster relief while a few other heroes came and joined as well, including Wash, who was able to clean the acid away far easier. "What's the status report?" All Might asked Detective Naomasa. "We don't have exact figures, but we have at least 10 deaths, 2 of them the villains," he admitted. "Only 2? All Might questioned. "I thought there were 3 of them." "There were ... The third one, Moonfish, is still alive, if barely. It seems like the Herrscher thought he was dead and didn't follow up," the detective noted as he glanced at where the fallen villain was being taken away. "Lucky him." All Might gritted his teeth. He may not have been one of those kinds of heroes, but the symbol of peace still found it, and just how a psychopath like Moonfish had been fortunate enough to survive while so many of his victims didn't. Is there any connection between them and the Herrscher? From what eyewitnesses say, she was watching the attack from atop a building before the acid user sprayed her. in which case she came in down and killed them in less than 10 minutes for the most. True man noted. I'd be more than willing to assume she isn't involved given how the villains supposedly acted. But you can never be too sure. I see. All Might noted. He'd need to inform Nezu and the others of this. Mr. All Might, a young voice called. The pro turned his attention to a little kid who had run up to him. Mr. All Might, please, you have to help me. He's trapped. Who's trapped? All Might asked. A boy. He threw me out of the cafe before it collapsed on him. The child cried as he pointed to the building. All Might hurried onto the scene, taking care not to do any further damage. Hello, the pro called as he began to carefully move the rubble to the side. He got no response. Hastening the pace, All Might kept going, but he found nothing there. I'm sorry, young one, but there isn't anyone here. But I saw him, the child said adamantly. All Might looked at the little kid with sad eyes. Okay, little one, why don't you describe the boy who helped you and me, and the detective can look for him? All Might reassured the kid. What did the boy look like? The kid went on to describe his hero. Well, All Might thought him a hero if the child's words were to go by. It takes real selflessness to risk being buried alive to save someone. However, as the child described the boy, All Might felt uneasy. The description it sounded very familiar to him. Once they were finished, the duo made sure to bid the child farewell as he went back to his mom. Once he was out of earshot, the detective turned to All Might. I'll follow up on this, the detective noted as he showed All Might the sketch he made. All Might's eyes widened as he saw the image. The pro grabbed it probably a lot quicker than he should have, but the detective didn't mind. Wait a minute, I know this boy. All Might realize. You do? Well, that's great. What's his name? Izuku Midoriya. Izuku found himself once again a prisoner in the Herrscher of the Void's body. This time though, instead of being amid a villain attack, he and the Herrscher were in the shower, ready to wash the acid of their body. It wouldn't have been so bad if ... it wasn't the Herrscher's body in particular that was being washed. The Herrscher had turned on the cold water, standing beneath the shower as she let the acid be cleansed. For the most part, Izuku tried not to let himself be distracted by the Herrscher's form. Instead, he decided to sort out his thoughts and try to make sense of what had happened that day. He hosted the Herrscher, that much was obvious now. He no longer was the sole user of his body, much to his shock. That said, the Herrscher's control was perhaps the least unsettling thing he had witnessed today. Izuku's mind wandered back to the site of the attack. His mind replayed the events that had been burnt into his brain. He had never seen it get so terrible. He had never been at the center of it. What's the matter, hero? The Herrscher taunted as she rinsed her arms. You seem shaken up. Didn't you want to be a pro? She mockingly asked. That place ... it was horrible, Izuku answered her. He felt thinking about everything he saw, how easily the people died before him. He could still hear the screams. He could still remember their faces. That's normal. That's how the real world can get, my dear host. Being a hero isn't all the glamour and fame that your pathetic pros make it out to be. When you're a hero, you see just what kind of cruelty exists in the world. All the destruction, the greed, the blood, all conveniently left out to the masses so that the rest of humanity can pretend that they are so righteous, kind, and noble. The Herrscher sneered. Izuku didn't say anything. However, the Herrscher had started to enjoy the conversation and couldn't resist continuing it. Tell me, Izuku, do you still want to try and be a hero in this wretched world? You're feeling queasy now, but I can tell you, this isn't even the ugliest it can get. She mused. I wonder, if you do continue, how long would it take till you break? A hero's job in my eyes has always been to save people, Izuku spoke. When I was young, I always thought saving people was the coolest thing in the world. That's why I want to be a hero. And now, do you still think it's cool? The Herrscher questioned. Running into a world of horrors, death, and destruction, knowing that your acts of heroism could very well leave you alone, helpless and trapped in the rubble, slowly being crushed to death. No, it's not cool, Izuku answered. I don't think I can ever look back on today and think it's cool ... but ... I can say it's worth it. Helping someone else ... that's the worth of being a hero. Haha, I see, the Herrscher noted with a manic laugh. So, in the end, you are still just a deluded fool, the Herrscher told him. Still thinking you can be a hero, now that's amusing. I can still try, Izuku retorted. How? The Herrscher questioned. How can you possibly help anyone? Look, I may not have a quirk, but a quirk is the least of your worries, my foolish host. The Herrscher cut him off. Your body is weak, pathetically weak if I'm being honest. You barely have any muscle, and your stamina is just awful. She chuckled. Honestly, what was even your plan to be a hero? Hope that if you wanted it bad enough you would get it. Do you even know how to fight? How to defend yourself? How can you protect anything if you can't protect yourself? Izuku was silent, yet the Herrscher continued to taunt and mock him. Have no fear, everyone. Izuku is here. Just make sure you aren't too heavy, otherwise he can't carry you, or hope even if he can, he doesn't get tired running. She laughed as she started to wash her hair. If you can't even save yourself, how do you honestly expect to save anyone? Then I'll train, Izuku defended. I'll work hard and get stronger, he replied adamantly. Is that so? The Herrscher notes as she moves her hair forward and lets the water cascade down her back. I suppose that would be a start. A stronger host meant a stronger body for her, so regardless she didn't see any harm in letting him pursue his efforts. Maybe she should even encourage it, let him foolishly make her new vessel even stronger for her. Wait, do you think I have a chance? You think I can be a hero? Izuku questioned. The Herrscher laughed even more. Nope, I'm just looking forward to seeing you break. To see as you put all your heart, soul, and passion into this and then have it all crumble before. The Herrscher explained. There wasn't any better place to fall than from the top after all. I should have known. Izuku sighed. Of course that was her reason, given how much disdain she had for humanity. He didn't know why he'd assume otherwise. One more piece of advice. The Herrscher told them as she started to rinse out her chest. Don't scream like that again, she told him. It annoys me, she explained. It brought up too many bad memories. She had thought she had truly snuffed out Babylon from her mind, but she was wrong. The tower still stood in her mind, forever etched into her memories. You are my host, your body is mine. Ergo, you should remember that whatever threatens you, threatens me. So, you don't need to scream loud enough to deafen anyone. I'll make sure to deal with any threats to us, the Herrscher explained. And should you foolishly find yourself in a situation that could result in your death, I'll be more than happy to squash any attempts you might make to be free of me. Do you understand? The Herrscher asked. Yes, loud and clear, Izuku told her. He didn't know how to feel about that response. Good, the Herrscher told him as she finished her shower. Once she was satisfied she was clean, and all the acid was off her body, she released her hold once more and let their body return to Izuku's form. Now, go and freshen up. We are hungry and I want dinner. That cafe food was subpar, the Herrscher ordered. Izuku had finally recovered. The experience between swapping forms with the Herrscher, the acid, and just the day's events in general had taken a toll on him. He was tempted to just collapse on his bed and sleep, but his fear of the Herrscher taking over once more while he was asleep made him reconsider the idea. So instead, he opted to do as she commanded. He changed into more casual clothes, a blue vest, and some black shorts, and dragged himself out of his room. He headed to the kitchen to make some food, instinctively going to look for a pack of cup noodles. Once he had prepared the food, he made his way back to the living room and sat on the couch. Took you long enough, the Herrscher remarked. Izuku jumped, startled by her voice, almost dropping his food. Luckily he didn't. Upon having finally caught himself, he turned to look at the Herrscher, who was merely looking at him with an amused face. It was then he noticed something odd about her. Upon closer inspection, he realized she was wearing the same outfit as he was. It even looked like it was the same size, given how snug it was around her body. To his surprise, the Herrscher was also holding her cup noodles in front of him. How? Izuku curiously asked. How are you? Here? The Herrscher finished with an all-knowing smile. None of your concern, she noted. The important thing is that you eat, the Herrscher told him, staring at her still hesitant. Izuku grabbed his fork, as did the Herrscher. Then he dipped into the cup and picked up the noodles, the Herrscher mimicking his moves as well. Finally, he places it in his mouth, with the Herrscher following his movements to a T. She even chewed it the same way he did and swallowed it as well. Do you have to unnerve me so much? Izuku questioned. Yes, the Herrscher answered. Your screaming annoyed me for the better part of the evening. If you're uncomfortable, then I can say we're even for now, she answered simply. But that wasn't intentional, Izuku defended. Don't care, she retorted. Now eat, she ordered. He complied, and soon Izuku and the Herrscher had the most awkward dinner he had ever experienced. He thought it would be best to break the tension by turning on the TV. It did not alleviate the tension. Izuku had landed it on a news channel covering the current events, mainly what happened that day. Among the highlights was how devastating the damage was to the area. The reporter brought up the villains involved, showing the Herrscher and the 3 villains on screen before showing how the Herrscher handled them. 2 of the villains were killed by the Herrscher. The third one is severely injured and being treated as we speak, the reporter explained. That word stuck with him. Killed. The Herrscher had effortlessly killed those villains using his body. Their deaths were on his hands. Scrappy little thing. Next time I won't go easy on him, the Herrscher mused. You aren't bothered by it? Izuku questioned as he glanced at the Herrscher. You took 2 lives so easily. Don't you feel the slightest bit concerned? He asked. Would it make it better if I said it was for the greater good of humanity? The Herrscher mockingly asked. Those people were hardly any saints. They were killed just as easily as me and did it in far more gruesome ways. Besides, I don't see what the big problem is. Heroes kill the time, she noted. No, they don't, Izuku argued. Heroes make sure villains are beaten and arrested, he told her. They don't take lives. Oh, please, don't kid yourself. Maybe that's the narrative they push now. But heroes throughout history always have blood on their hands. Just look at a story where the heroes kill monsters, or war stories for any nation, where a country celebrates their war heroes who destroyed their enemy faction. or second eruption where Siren's death was a celebrated event, with many of the humans involved being hailed as heroes for stopping her. Heroes are only heroes when the majority of people choose to acknowledge them as such. The Herrscher told Izuku. Otherwise, there is little difference between them and a villain. All that matters is who the public thinks is right. Not who is right, a very easy opinion to change. What about disaster relief? Izuku questioned. What? The Herrscher questioned. Izuku glanced at the television. So far only 10 deaths have been recorded, 2 of which belong to the villains. The reporter claimed. However, there were many more who were injured and buried under the falling rubble. Workers are still finding more people as we speak, the reporter claimed while the camera showed a firefighter helping to lift some rubble off an injured woman. Can those people be anything but heroes? Izuku sighed in relief when he saw the woman reunite with her son. Firefighters and the other public servants, the medics, the cops, they all were doing their part to relieve the disaster. You didn't seem to think so. The girl refused. When All Might told you on the rooftops that you couldn't be a pro-hero without a quirk, that if you want to save people, you should become one of those public servants. What was your response? Were you delighted? Were you accepting of the idea? No, you weren't ... You were heartbroken. She retorted. Your idol, your hero, the person you looked up to the most, said your dream was not possible and it shattered you. The Herrscher told him. If you ask me, that says a lot about what you think those heroes are. Seems like most of the current populace don't see them as such. I'll confess, you're right about that, Izuku admitted with some shame. I didn't know what it meant to be saved. The first time I was in danger, I was saved by All Might, so I didn't have any change in perspective. Then today, you saved me. Really, that's what convinced you? The Herrscher rolled her eyes. In a way, I realized it didn't matter whether it was All Might or you. I just wanted to be saved by someone when I couldn't save myself. If firefighters, medics, and the like can do that, then it shouldn't matter. A hero is someone who saves people, nothing else, Izuku told her. Deluded fool. The Herrscher scoffed. You know, you could make a good hero if you tried, Izuku told her. With your powers, you could become the greatest hero of all time. Not this again. The Herrscher rolled her eyes. Let me guess, you want me to use my powers for good, to protect all that is beautiful in this wretched world and whatnot? The Herrscher told him. I don't care about humans, much less feel any inclination to save them. Quite the opposite, actually. The Herrscher informed. You technically saved me, Izuku told her, and helped me with the acid. He tried to reason. Pragmatic reasons at best. The Herrscher dismissed. As I said before, you are my vessel. Your body's well-being is my main concern. Nothing else matters. Not you, humanity, or even your mother matter to me. In fact, she looked at him with a cruel smile. What if I told you? I almost killed your mom. You what? Izuku exclaimed. Come on, think back, Izuku. Think back to those dreams you had. The Herrscher urged him. The ones you had about me, these past few days. Wait ... Are you saying? He gasped in horror. He remembered one specifically where the Herrscher had brandished a knife at his mother's vulnerable back. Those weren't dreams. The Herrscher chuckled. Do you still think I can be a hero? My mom's still alive, Izuku noted. You didn't kill her, but I could. Why didn't you? Izuku questioned. You easily killed those villains. Why not my mom? Pragmatic reasons, the Herrscher answered. You're easier to control if she's alive. She admitted. It was the truth. Inko's death while leaving him guilty could also make him more rebellious to her control. It was the logical move to make. So that's it. Any act of kindness you do, it's all for a pragmatic reason? Izuku asked. Do you think there is any other reason? The Herrscher questioned him. How foolish her host could be. He knew not what it meant to be Herrscher. I don't know, I hope there is, Izuku answered. I'm sure deep down, you must have some reason for doing all this. He told her. Oh, there is a reason. The Herrscher mused. At her core, she was nothing more than an embodiment of hatred and rage, given form. It was in her very nature to hate humanity and see its worse, a nature she gladly accepted. The only thing that stopped her was naive hosts who believed otherwise. Not that it matters, of course. I had hoped I could convince you. Izuku sighed. What's done is done. Once your time runs out, I'll go and destroy whatever heroes are left and then the world. That's a promise, the Herrscher told him. You're welcome to try and stop me, but it wouldn't matter. You've already seen what I can do. I'm inevitable, and I'm still here, Izuku answered. Which means I still have a chance, however small it might be. I'm sure I can find a way to stop you, Izuku told her. You can try. The Herrscher yawned. Well, I'm beat. Today was hectic, so I think I'll go and rest now. With that she vanished from his view, leaving Izuku alone in the living room with his empty cup of noodles. Izuku threw away the cup and then headed to his room. Lying on his bed, Izuku thought about his conversation with the Herrscher as looked up at the ceiling. She had made some good points. Many were painful to hear, but they were true. He didn't understand what it meant to be a hero, nor did he try to become one. He would change that. He'd prove her wrong. He turned to his table and saw his notebooks, the hero analysis for the future series he had written. Wait a minute ... Oh crap. Izuku got up and hurried to the table. Upon opening the first page, he glanced it over quickly. He had a breakdown of a hero, advantages, breakdowns, and weakness. Izuku realized he had the weaknesses of many heroes in his books. Books are very easy to reach for the Herrscher. He thought back to the All Might fight. She had used the knowledge he had on All Might to exploit his weak spot. She couldn't let her do it again for others. He hurried to his mom's room and grabbed the paper shredder she kept in her room for her documents. Now with the paper shredder in his room, he looked at the notebooks he had so carefully filled over how many years. Izuku took a deep breath before he opened one and ripped the page out. He looked at the page, one of his first analysis attempts at All Might. With a heavy heart, he placed it in the shredder. Then he repeated the process again, taking page after page from the book, shredding every single one. Once one book was finished, he moved to another and then another. It hurt to do it, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Izuku had hoped for the Herrscher, but he wasn't going to be naive about it. She made her intentions very clear, and he saw firsthand what she could do. He would try to find whatever good could possibly exist, but not at the expense of anyone else. Once he was finished, he walked back to his bed and lay down. Never had he thought simply shredding paper could take such a mental and emotional toll out of him. It was worth it though to keep the information from her hands. I'll also need to keep those thoughts out of my head. Izuku realized he had read those books so many times that he probably memorized them. Okay, just need to block it all off, Izuku told himself. Just block it out. Just block it out. He repeated as he drifted off to sleep. As Izuku fell into the world of dreams, his body shifted once more. Black and green hair turned to white, as once green eyes became gold. The Herrscher sat up and glanced at the torn paper in front of her. How amusing, she thought. She hadn't even considered the notes at the time. She was sure she could still handle most of the heroes, but the notes now piqued her curiosity. A shame they were destroyed. Perhaps she should be more invested in what her host could offer. Not that it would matter. All Might was an outlier, not the standard. She was sure she could handle anything anyone else threw at her. Still, just to be sure, she tried to reach into Izuku's mind like she did before. It was easy enough to slowly peel into his memories. So many memories she delved past until finally she found the books ... and then, what? The Herrscher frowned. She got nothing. That wasn't right. She tried again, but her response was the same. Damn it. She scowled. She had laughed at the idea, but Izuku had actually done it. He actually kept the notes out of her reach. She frowned. This was bad. She thought back to early that day. Izuku had wanted to avoid seeing the destruction of the acid villain, and he had gotten his wish. He didn't realize it at the time, but he was the one who closed their eyes, not her. She just pretended to keep him unaware, and it had cost her. I need to figure out how to get a handle on this. She realized she was not going to have a repeat of last time. The Herrscher of the Void leaned against the wall. She didn't like being in a medical office. She didn't like doctors at all, but this was where her host had taken her, so this is where she went. She glanced over at Inko, taking note of how different she looked here. She was taller, slimmer, a far cry from the short and chubby lady the Herrscher was used to seeing. Before Izuku and Inko sat a doctor, with a bald head and bushy mustache, slouched in his chair. Sorry kid, it's just not gonna happen, the doctor informed them. The Herrscher glanced at them, taking note of the situation. She saw when Izuku dropped the toy he had been holding, an All Might action figure. What the doctor said next wasn't much relevance to the Herrscher. Her focus was on the young host before. She glanced at the young boy, who was 5 years old, with an indifferent stare. His eyes had whitened, but the rest of his body had been frozen from the shock. This is your worst memory, she spoke to the boy. He didn't answer, and she sighed to herself. Of course, he couldn't. She stared at him once more, taking note of the tears forming on his face. Izuku Midoriya's worst memory was being told he was quirkless. Was this supposed to be a joke? The Herrscher reached out and touched the teardrop. The moment her fingers contacted the tear, a wave of voices washed over her. A strong hero needs a strong quirk. You can be an awesome hero with an amazing quirk. When I get my quirk, I'll be a hero just like him. The Herrscher blinked and she found herself standing before a computer. Young Izuku had been running to it, jumping into the chair, and excitedly rocking as Inko approached it. The white-haired girl watched as Inko put on a video, Izuku's favorite video. It showed the worst-case scenario. A terrible disaster had occurred to humanity. Amid the chaos, All Might had emerged, carrying people with him, laughing in the face of danger. He's so cool, Izuku cheered as he held his toy. The Herrscher sighed. So that's why her foolish host idolized the blonde buffoon so much. She recalled Izuku's words. He always thought saving people was cool. All Might saves people, many people, that's why Izuku admired him. The Herrscher rubbed her temples. Her host's worst day wasn't being quirkless, it was being unable to be a hero. She scowled at this way of thinking. He had no reason to want to save these insects, and yet he still wanted to. He was a fool even back then and still a fool even now. Why did her hosts always end up being foolish heroes? The memory changed once more. The room was darker and Izuku was smiling and crying. A Herrscher looked on alongside Inko, who was just remorseful. She watched as the mother consoled her son. A son whose idiotic dreams had been crushed and shattered before him. "I'm sorry, Izuku." Inko apologized as she hugged her son, as if this was somehow her fault. The Herrscher just turned and left. She didn't need to be reminded how much Inko loved and cared for her son. Still no hero memories, the Herrscher thought as she continued to scan through what she could. It had irked her how her host had been able to lock away such information. If he could hide info from her, then that meant his will was strong enough to rebel. All his memories should be accessible to her. She wandered around for a while before finding herself in a park. Another boy was cowering and Izuku had stood to defend him. The Herrscher's eyes glanced at where he was facing, and she frowned at what she saw. It was the brat she had skewed before. You want to pretend to be a hero. You don't stand a chance without a quirk. Deku, the brat taunted as he punched his fist, a small explosion igniting when he did. The Herrscher looked on as her terrified host was then jumped by the three boys. She let the memory play out. They thrashed her host and left him on the ground, barely unconscious. It was a very frustrating sight for the Herrscher. She looked at the boy who had been beaten down. Her weak and powerless host, who couldn't even stand up to his bullies, was showing enough resolve to resist her attempts at accessing his memories. You can't hide yourself in such childish delusions forever. She sneered at the child before her. Sooner or later he was going to have reality and see the truth of the world. Izuku felt excited. Today was the day. He had already submitted his application to his new school and was currently waiting to see if he was accepted. Due to the nature of the villain attacks, it was rather easy to move around, especially since his grades were good enough. Now he'd wait and see if he got in. But for now it was time to train. Alright, this should be good. Not many people in the area, he noted as he looked around. He had gotten a head start on the day. It was set and he had just arrived at a nearby park at the crack of dawn. There was barely anyone around except maybe a little old lady feeding the pigeons nearby. Izuku took out his notepad. He had been going through possible workout plans. He had considered weight training, but then realized the cost might be too much. He neither had the money to afford training at a gym nor buy the gear for home. The presence of the Herrscher also discouraged him from finding any gym. A small part of him felt it best to avoid populated spaces regularly if he could. Glancing down at his routine, calisthenics, Izuku began to stretch to prepare himself for what came next. Calisthenics was simple exercises, focusing on using the body's weight to train it. It was basic stuff: push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and running. It was easy to do and affordable for him. He sincerely hoped this was a good start. It was 4 exercises: 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10 km run. I should be fine. Well, what do you think? Any bright ideas in that head of yours for how we deal with this girl? All Might questioned as he sat across from Nezu. The principal in question was currently looking over the footage gathered from the Herrscher's latest outing. Hard to say. Her ability to make portals certainly is astounding. She can redirect and store attacks, making most projectile attacks quite difficult to use. Not even melee attacks are completely viable since, as your fight shows, she can just turn it on yourself. Additionally, it would be almost impossible to hold her while she's conscious due to the chances she'll just teleport away. Her ability to make constructs means she also has a means to go on the offensive. In other words, All Might trailed off. I need some time to ponder this, Nezu noted as he rubbed his head. Quirk users with spatial manipulation are always rather perplexing individuals at times. It's puzzling to me as well, All Might added. It's one thing to rampage and attack heroes and civilians, but this time she didn't even seem interested in doing so. He pondered. I heard about that. According to the security footage we retrieved, the only real victims of the Herrscher this time were the villains. It's a rather puzzling development, he noted. It seems the previous assumption people made that she was working with them was false. Are you sure? All Might questioned. She could have just double-crossed them when they accidentally struck her. While possible, I think the more likely case is just that she was in the area. These villains had several attacks in other areas prior, and she was absent from all of them. If they were allies, she wouldn't have been so brutal to all 3 of them. At best, she would have only killed the one who wronged her, Nezu pointed out. But I concur, we can't rule out any possibilities. They may have recently recruited her. All Might sighed as he leaned back in the chair. Another potential lead had potentially become a dead end. It was frustrating, to say the least. He had been so sure the villain's attack could lead to something. They had one of the villains in custody who could potentially reveal information, but given the almost insane nature of the villain and the other circumstance, it was seeming very unlikely now. You seem to be rather frustrated. I think it may be best for us to switch topics for the time being. No use trying to grasp at straws, Nezu told All Might. Is there anything else that's on the mind as late? All Might glanced at him. There was one thing, but he wondered if he should indulge his curiosity. He had considered leaving it to True Man after all. Still, it couldn't hurt to ask the principal. Does the name Izuku Midoriya sound familiar? All Might questioned. Izuku Midoriya. Nezu questioned. It sounds familiar. He's a young boy who I am assuming applied for UA. All Might noted. Assume. I met him the other day. He shared with me his dreams of becoming a hero. All Might recounted. Sounds like many young people these days. Nezu noted. What's his quirk? He doesn't have one. He's quirkless. All Might added. Nezu's ears perked up at this as he looked up from his computer. He hadn't even touched the keys yet. He asked me if I thought he could be a pro hero without a quirk. I presume you told him no, Nezu noted. He wasn't against the idea personally. Anyone had the potential to be a hero, but that didn't mean he wasn't aware of how challenging such a task would be on the young boy, how dangerous the job truly was. I did. I told him he couldn't. If he wanted to save people, I told him to go work with the public servants. He'd have much better luck there. All Might noted. A quirkless hero isn't impossible, but it would require a lot of work and resources, Nezu noted. If I'm not mistaken, I remember another quirkless boy who thought the same thing. It would have been easier back then. All Might told him. The power gap has only grown with time. Back then, though difficult, a quirkless hero did seem possible, but now, I'm not so sure. Do you think you'd still have tried if you didn't meet Nana? Nezu questioned. All Might looked up at him. I don't know, he answered truthfully. I've never stopped to consider it. It didn't seem to matter honestly. I got to be a hero either way. I became All Might, the #1 hero, the world's symbol of peace. I did what I always wanted to do, save the world and give people hope. It's hard to imagine living my life any other way. So why the sudden interest? It can't just be because he's quirkless. Perhaps his speech touched you that much. Nezu noted. I won't lie, he did remind me of myself, but I know better than anyone how hard it was to compete against people with quirks. All Might confessed. But that's not the reason this time. You see, a young child at the villain attack site had informed me a boy matching Izuku's description had saved him from some falling rubble. According to the boy, Izuku was buried underneath, but when I arrived and cleared the rubble, he was gone. If the one who saved the kid is Izuku, then perhaps I should personally go and thank him, or at the very least, arrange for him to meet the kid. Selfless acts of heroism like his should be acknowledged as such. Rightly so, Nezu noted. Ah, here's his file. The principal delighted said as he started to read Izuku's application. However, as soon as he read it, a frown began to form on his face. How curious. Is something the matter? All Might questioned. Izuku Midoriya is a student of Aldera Junior High School, Nezu answered. He saw All Might's eyes widen at the revelation, but he continued regardless. He's one of only 2 students who applied from said school, the other student being Katsuki Bakugo. That's worrisome, Nezu finished. One of the first places the Herrscher destroyed in her rampage was that specific school. One of the first victims she claimed was a boy who attended said school. Now her second appearance had another boy from said school present. Once as a fluke, twice as a coincidence. They certainly hoped there wouldn't be a third one. I think we may have found another lead. All Might told Nezu. Hopefully, they could find the Herrscher without having to worry about her causing any more trouble. I don't think I can move anymore. Izuku sighed as he collapsed underneath a tree. He was exhausted and he felt his whole body ached from his routine. That was good, right? No pain, no gain, that's what they said. Young man, what are you doing? A voice called from beside him. Izuku jumped in surprise. He then screamed in pain as his sore body did not like the sudden jerked movements. Oh, he whined. Easy there, young boy. The lady told him as she helped him sit back down. Are you all right? She questioned. Izuku glanced at her. She was a short elderly woman, if he had to guess maybe over 50 just to be safe. Yeah, Izuku reassured her as he tried to give her a thumbs up. It didn't work, his arms still felt sore and he winced a little when he flexed them. I'm just sore from training, that's all. He told her. I'm not sure about that. She noted. You look ready to pass out. She reached into her purse and brought out an unsealed bottle of water. Here, drink this, she instructed. No, I'm just a little tired, Izuku told her as he politely refused. I got up really early, he explained. The old woman glanced him over. She was shorter than him, but that didn't stop him from feeling a little intimidated by her gaze. Very well, the old woman told him. Just remember, if you feel tired while working out, it's a sign from your body that you should stop and rest. If you push yourself, then you risk passing out, and that's not good when you're alone. She warned. Thank you for your advice, ma'am. Izuku bowed. I'll remember that in future. If you don't mind me asking, what are you training for? The woman questioned. I'm training to be a hero. Izuku nervously chuckled. The woman seemed to just chuckle at this. I should have figured. The woman mused. I presume you're applying to UA. She guessed. Yeah, Izuku told her. I'm applying to UA. How did you know? He questioned. Lucky guess, the woman told him. Tell me, how long you have been training? She wondered. This is the first time I've seen you in this park. Well, I just started today, Izuku admitted. He was half expecting she'd scold him for being so late. Really, she wondered. Well, I suppose now is a good time as any. You still have 10-11 months. Plenty of time to get in shape. I suppose so, Izuku told her. He was surprised. She didn't ask for his quirk or lack thereof. As he glanced her over, he didn't notice anything that would indicate she might have a quirk. He could be wrong though. Well, good luck, the old lady said as she turned to leave. Take care, dear, and make sure to pace yourself. I'm curious to see if you make it, she commented. Thanks, ma'am, Izuku responded as he watched her leave. What a nice lady, he thought. Is it really necessary that I go, Mom? Izuku questioned as he looked at his mother. I'm not feeling all that well and I wanted to rest for tomorrow. He lied. Well, it wasn't a complete lie. His entire body was sore from his training regime, plus he also had school the next day. He really did want to rest, but more importantly, he wanted to stay away. Izuku, I know it's difficult and he might have troubled you in the past, but it's not about him. It's about Mitsuki, Inko reiterated. Katsuki was released yesterday, and she invited us over for dinner. She was really devastated when she got news her son was injured, and it would be rude if we decline. Inko told him. Yes, but I mean, it would be alright if you went alone. Izuku tried to reason. He didn't need to go there. The young hero didn't know how he'd feel if he saw Bakugo's injuries. Maybe it was wrong for him to want to avoid it. It was still technically his fault, right? He was the one who freed the Herrscher and gave her the fuel needed to injure him. Maybe he should make amends and go and apologize to Kanchan. Apologize for what? I just paid him 10 years worth of pain that he inflicted on you in 10 seconds. The Herrscher scoffed. You don't have any reason to apologize. It's not like I even killed him. Izuku, you two have known each other for years now. I'm sure he'll like some company. Inko tried to tell him, even if he won't admit it. I highly doubt that, Izuku thought nonetheless. He looked at his mom in her pleading eyes. He sighed. All right, I'll go. He answered his mom. Just let me take a shower really quick, he told her as he left to go freshen up. He hurried into the shower, throwing off his clothes and turning on the water. Izuku sighed as he let the water wash over him. He could feel the familiar presence next to him. He turned his gaze and saw the Herrscher's back, facing him. What are you thinking, Herrscher? Izuku questioned as he stared at the girl. She rarely appears unless it's to taunt or tease him. I'm wondering how much fun I can have tonight when you let me out, she answered simply. What makes you think I will? Izuku questioned. Your memories. You may admire this boy, but you also fear, resent, and hate him, the Herrscher noted. When you meet him, you will most likely be a victim of his rage. Injured animals are often more violent when they feel threatened, and I did maim him quite a bit. I'm just wondering how long it will take for you to snap when Bakugo tries to blow you up again. She chuckled. I'd never indulge you like that. I would never hurt Bakugo. Izuku denied. Would never or could never? The Herrscher asked. You see, I've seen your memories, Izuku. I know that you've tried to fight him before, back when you were just a powerless little boy who wanted to be a hero. The Herrscher noted. Back then you didn't have the power to defend yourself, you lost, and you never tried again. She whispered. Now you have power, my power, and if you let me do as I please, I'll make sure to put Bakugo in his place. What you plan to do, and what I want, are two different things, Izuku answered. You'll hurt him or worse. I don't want that. Are you sure? The Herrscher told him. Not even deep down. Izuku didn't answer her. She chuckled. Silence usually meant guilt. That's all she needed to know. Even if you deny it, there is always that part of us, our lowest instinctual desires, the parts of ourselves we ignore, that we reject because they don't match with what we think want. The Herrscher whispered, it's natural for anyone, for anything, to feel anger, rage, and hatred for things that hurt them. The Herrscher vanished not long after, leaving only her words to marinate in his mind. Deep down maybe he did want to fight Bakugo, but it wasn't for what the Herrscher claimed. It just wasn't right. It just wasn't right. The trip to the Bakugos had been quiet. Izuku hadn't spoken and Inko hadn't pressed him further for any conversations, seeing that he had been reluctant to come. That said, she did notice how anxious Izuku had been. She had seen him gripping his pants as he constantly glanced into the rear-view mirror, always looking back for someone who Inko could not see. Her eyes followed his and he kept staring at the back seat but never once said a word even as his expressions changed. It was concerning. You should stop worrying, the Herrscher whispered as she leaned next to Izuku's ear. Your mom is getting concerned, the Herrscher reminded as her head tilted towards Inko. Izuku's gaze shifted from the Herrscher to his mom. He hadn't realized how much of his discomfort she had noticed. Maybe he needed to learn to hide it better. He could hear a mocking giggle from the unseen third party. Couldn't this night just end soon? Are you sure this is a reasonable theory? True Man questioned All Might. I mean, while there is no doubt that those two boys may come from the same school, it's still a shot in the dark, he commented. I know it looks far-fetched, but my intuition tells me there has to be some connection. All Might tried to reason. She goes out of her way to destroy this school in particular. Why? All Might wonders. Maybe there were bad memories there. She also destroyed one of the DMVs. Should we assume she hates that as well? Don't be ridiculous. All Might snapped. Everyone hates the DMV, but that's beside the point. We don't have much to go on, but we know these two boys are connected and that her only appearances tie into them. Her attacks also coincide with villain attacks. The result is that most villains involved in those attacks are dead or almost dead. True Man noted. What is the chance she's a vigilante? A vigilante wouldn't go after an innocent kid. All Might be noted. Vigilantes are just heroes without licenses. They may not abide by the laws, and most of them aren't looking to hurt innocents. Hurt villains maybe, but not innocent civilians. That depends on who's defining innocent and guilty. True Man noted. That's fair. All Might sighed as he slouched in his chair. This is driving me crazy. Yeah, Nezu told me so. True Man chuckled. But it's understandable to be paranoid. He added, AFO is a man who's spent probably over 200 years terrifying the world from the shadows. In that amount of time, there is no telling the connections and the power he could have amassed in secret. It's not impossible for him to be playing a long game with us. No, it isn't. All Might agreed. For the symbol of peace, All for One is his greatest nemesis, the ultimate evil, the be-all end-all big bad boss. Yet the same couldn't be said for the villain. To AFO, All Might was nothing more than another bearer of one for all, the eighth user in a long line of heroes fighting him for the past 200 years. All Might may have been the most challenging one, but every other user would have been so at one point. For all he knew, All for One could have already foreseen the growing cap and accounted for it. Look, if it makes you feel better, we can go and talk to the Bakugos. Maybe that will put your mind at ease. True Man told the hero. I'm not sure it will. All Might admitted. If those boys were not involved with the Herrscher, then they were at a dead end. If they did, then perhaps they had led, but it was not one All Might would like to hear. The idea that the villain could be targeting those kids, it made him sick. Regardless, we should head out now. True Man suggested. Katsuki Bakugo was recently released from the hospital yesterday. He should be resting home with his mother right now. True Man noted. Let's go. All Might stood up, buffing into his hero form. Wait a minute, Toshi, I think it might be a little concerning if All Might shows up. True Man told him. All Might looked down at himself. Besides, isn't it a waste of the few minutes you have to just stay buffed up? No, All Might said before deflating back into the skeletal Yagi. I could maintain the form for longer times provided I didn't do any fighting, but I see your point. He admitted. It would attract too much attention. All right then. Well, in that case, looks like you're my new assistant. True Man told him. I'm not going to need to walk with a notebook and write everything you discuss, right? All Might questioned. True Man didn't say anything. Good night, Mistuki. Inko greeted with Izuku following suit. Sorry, we're a little late. Nah, you aren't late, you're actually rather early. Mitsuki comments. Nice to you again, Izuku. Nice to see you as well, Miss Bakugo. Izuku responds as she lets them in. If you're wondering about Katsuki, he's in his room, though I should warn you, he's still a little moody after ... you know. I'll keep that in mind, Izuku answered. He had no intention of seeing Bakugo just yet, instead finding himself sitting on the couch in the living room. It felt so wrong to be here. He shouldn't be here. Oh, trying to stay away. The Herrscher commented. That's not very nice. She told him. Heroes are supposed to be courageous. They need to face their fears, not chicken out. She taunted. I'm not chickening out. Didn't you hear? Kachan's not in the mood. It would be rude to interrupt him. Izuku argued. Oh, really? Well, we can't have that. The Herrscher told him. Izuku felt something overtaking his legs and his arms. Izuku's eyes widened in worry. He tried to fight back, asserting his grip on the couch and trying to keep himself in place. What are you doing? He pleaded in his mind. He could feel the Herrscher exerting her influence. His grip loosened, and he was forced to stand up. Helping you face your fears. The Herrscher responded as she forced Izuku to start walking, or whatever you could call that movement. His legs were moving, but his body was trying to resist as he fought with himself. No, I don't want to go, Izuku told her. I don't want to go. Izuku turned his head to see his mom and Mitsuki talking in the kitchen. He wanted to try calling for help, but his hand immediately covered his mouth. He was lucky he was able to grab the corner of the wall with his next arm. But it still wasn't doing much to stop the Herrscher. Come on, if Kachan is so nice, then you should have no problem confronting him, she teased. Izuku's grip remained on the wall. Well, I guess we'll have to do this the hard way. She sighed. Hard way, Izuku muttered. Before he even realized it, a portal opened beneath his feet. Oh, Izuku fell into the void. He didn't fall for long as the portal reopened not more than a few feet away, right in front of Bakugo's door. Izuku was flung out, crashing right into the door with a loud thud. Oh, Izuku winced. How did she do that? Izuku thought she needed to transform to use her powers. Not really, the Herrscher responded. I'm the ruler of the void. My dominion is manipulating space and to an extent even time. The Herrscher boasted. Transforming your body is merely out of convenience for me, since I much prefer my form over yours, as it is stronger and more resilient. It is not a necessity for me to do so. If I so wanted, I could create portals and lances even now. Especially now. The Herrscher punctuated. Who's there? Bakugo growled as he opened the door. Izuku squeaked as Bakugo's eyes fell on him. Diku, he growled in a low voice. What are you doing here, Deku? Bakugo yelled as little explosions went off in his hands. Izuku quickly stood up, backing himself into the wall. Beside him, the Herrscher was watching the interaction between the two boys with care. I'm not doing anything. Your mom invited us over. Izuku quickly defended as he held his hands up as a sign he meant no harm. The Herrscher frowned at him and forced his arms back down. Izuku's eyes widened as his arms moved to his side. He tried to move them back up, but he was met with resistance from the Herrscher. Stop that. The Herrscher spoke. Izuku didn't listen and continued to resist. Do not submit yourself to that weakling. You are embarrassing us, she warned Izuku. He didn't listen to her. Are you making fun of me? Bakugo sneered, his voice embittered as a vein popped out on his forehead. Why you? He threw a right hook at Izuku, his fist colliding quickly with Izuku's face. The green and black-haired boy staggered back against the wall, using it to support himself. Izuku breathed deeply, holding his left cheek. It hurts a lot, but it was nothing new. He could see the Herrscher's disapproving stare. She let out a sigh as she leaned back against the wall. Well, are you just going to take that? Give me the reins. Let me finish him off, she whispered to him as her eyes drifted over to Bakugo. Look at him, she commanded. Izuku's eyes followed, and to his surprise, Bakugo was also recoiling in pain. He was currently clutching his right shoulder as he bit back a scream. Izuku could feel the smugness on the Herrscher's face. He's weaker than he once was, and you're stronger than before. If not me, then you can thrash him. The Herrscher tempted. Izuku ignored the Herrscher. Bakugo, are you all right? He asked the injured boy. His response was Bakugo thrusting his hand into his chest and releasing an explosion. The force pushed him back into the wall. Izuku gasped in pain as he struck the wall before Bakugo kneed him in the stomach. Izuku bent forward, clutching his abdomen. It hurt a lot. Still, he'd bear it. He forced himself to stand back up straight. Fight back, Izuku. Punch him, kick him, headbutt the bastard, the Herrscher told him as she clenched her fists. It egged her to see her host like this. He was fine submitting himself to his bully, but against her, he'd resist. Just do something, anything. I don't need your pity, Deku. Bakugo yelled. You think just because I'm injured, that means I'm some weakling like you now? Bakugo punched him in the ribs. No, Izuku apologized. I would never. He defended himself. His voice was shaky. He didn't want to be here, to be facing Bakugo right now. He could feel his body starting to tremble as his palms became sweaty. It was an all too familiar feeling to him. You damn nerd. Get out of my sight right now, Bakugo ordered as he stepped forward. He expected Izuku to cower, to run away like the pest he was. No, the Herrscher spoke when she sensed Izuku's desire to leave. Izuku's feet were rooted in the ground and his body refused to move, as if it was paralyzed. You will not run away. Not this time. If you insist on resisting me, then you ought to resist him as well. It was no good. The Herrscher insisted on keeping him here. Looks like he had no choice. He had to try reasoning with Catch-on. Bakugo, please, I don't want to hurt you. Izuku tried to warn his former friend. He didn't want to hurt him, to let the Herrscher out. Not when so many others were around. Really, you think you can hurt me? Bakugo chuckled. Give it your best shot. Bakugo taunted, as if the little quirkless wimp would do anything. Come on, Izuku. He's actually asking for you to do it. The Herrscher pointed out to the quirkless boy. No, that's not what I meant. Izuku tried to defend. I just wanted to apologize. He spoke with a tremble in his voice. For the Herrscher. The Herrscher, Bakugo said in a quieter voice, his eyes slowly twitching. His teeth clenched as he heard the name of that wretch. He grabbed Izuku with his good arm and pulled him close. What do you have to apologize for with the Herrscher? Bakugo glowered at the boy. If I was there. Izuku stuttered. If he was awake at the time, perhaps he could have stopped the Herrscher. Perhaps he could have convinced her not to do it. I could have done something. What do you think you could even do? Bakugo slammed Izuku back on the wall. You think you could have saved me from the villain? Get it through your skull, Deku. You're no hero. He mocked as he threw Izuku back on the ground. I'm sure if you had been there, you'd have been dead on the spot. Heck, I bet the Herrscher wouldn't even kill you because that's how pathetic you are. It would be a waste of time. The Herrscher didn't say anything, and quite frankly, Izuku didn't want her to speak. It was horrifying enough to live with her, but he could only imagine the terrifying situation he'd be in without the mercy of being her host. It was very likely to be true as well. I'm nothing like you, Deku, Bakugo repeated. I'm not weak like you. When I recover, I'm going to train my quirk and get even stronger. Then when I become a hero, I'll make sure that whore pays. He clenched his fist as he glared at Izuku. Izuku, the Herrscher whispered darkly. If you don't fight back, I will. The Herrscher threatened. She was growing more and more annoyed by the boy attacking her host and insulting her as well. Izuku tried to ignore the Herrscher's words as he looked over Bakugo. The explosion user was mad. Anger practically radiated from his body. Yet Izuku saw something else, something he'd never thought he'd see on Bakugo. "You're shaking," he commented. This seemed to surprise Bakugo, whose eyes widened briefly. "What?" he gasped in surprise before looking down at his hand. "No, I'm not," Bakugo told him. "You're afraid of the Herrscher," Izuku commented. It was a familiar feeling, one he had gotten to know too well. Of course, Bakugo didn't have the Herrscher's soul bonded to him, but Izuku could only imagine how much trauma she might have had. Afraid? Bakugo gritted his teeth. He wasn't afraid. She had just gotten lucky. That was all. If he faced her again, things would be different. "I'm not afraid," he screamed at Deku. He threw another punch, this time with his left hand, his quirk igniting once more. Izuku braced himself, prepared to take the blast head on. He didn't want it to hit. It was going to hurt a lot. He didn't want to deal with another explosion, but he had to. "Enough!" the Herrscher screamed in Izuku's head. Izuku felt the Herrschers will overtake him. He tried to stop it, but he couldn't. It was too strong at this point. He could feel the control of his body get ripped right away from him. Bakugo's eyes widened as green eyes turned gold and black hair turned white. "How are you and Masaru taking it?" Inko questioned as she sat down with Mitsuki. She could only imagine just how scary such a situation might be. Mitsuki looked at her friend and sighed. "We're glad he's alive," Mitsuki answered as she sipped her tea. "But it was still a terrifying time." "Yeah, it's good things are better now," Inko noted. "We still haven't told him," Mitsuki lamented as she placed her cup down. She glanced over at the stairway, making sure no one was there. According to the doctors, Katsuki's arms are damaged enough that his ability to use his quirk is now compromised, but he can still them, right? Inko questioned. "Yeah, he can, but the kickback now will hurt him," Mitsuki noted. "Even when he fully recovers, he'll never be able to use them like how he used to. He's always been a proud boy, overconfident at times, but he was always so sure of his quirk," Mitsuki noted. "Now I'm just wondering how to break it to him. Katsuki's a strong and stubborn child. I'm sure he'll be fine," Inko assured her. "Inko, I know this is going to sound rude," Mitsuki told her, "but how did you handle it when you had to tell Izuku?" Inko froze. She turned her gaze from Mitsuki and looked at her cup of tea. I don't think I handled it well either. I was fortunate the doctor had just bluntly told him. All I could do was try and console him afterward," Inko recalled. "Somehow I don't think he'd be in the mood." Mitsuki chuckled. "There's a reason we have our floors and ceilings soundproof. When he starts exploding his frustrations, it can be unpleasant," she noted. "I sure hope Izuku and him are doing okay." Inko sighed as she looked up. Ding dong. "Oh, that's probably Masaru. I'll go get the door," Mitsuki told Inko as she walked to the door. "Inspector Naomasa," Mitsuki gasped. Inko looked over from where she was sitting and saw two strange men at the door. With a space, a purple void, the Herrscher of the Void had appeared before the young boy, his bedroom and hallway fully devoured by her domain. Her face was expressionless, but her gaze was cold and unfeeling. Amber eyes pulsed with a radiant power, alien to this world and its inhabitants. They were devoid of any emotion, any warmth that was familiar to other beings. They were an empty void threatening to swallow the arrogant child. Bakugo's body had frozen in its place at the woman before him. Her skin was pale, almost white like that of a ghost, and her hair was just snowy. Bakugo tried to move, but he felt his body stiffen even more, as if he was being clutched by an invisible force. He was powerless. He was helpless. He wanted to scream, but his mouth couldn't open. The Herrscher lifted her right hand and clenched her fist. Without even touching him, Bakugo felt a hand grasp around his neck as the air was forced out of his body. It was agonizing, but no matter what, Bakugo couldn't make a sound, not a peep. He opened his palms trying to make an explosion, but two portals appeared and devoured both his hands, leaving him with two stubs. After what felt like an eternity, the Herrscher released her grip and Bakugo could finally breathe. He gasped for air. Too weak. She finally spoke softly. She was floating a few feet away, yet it felt like she was right next to him, her lips just barely touching his ears as she whispered. She formed a familiar lance above her head. Bakugo realized what that was. He started breathing heavily, his heart racing a million beats a minute. No, it couldn't be. Not again. Without hesitation, the lance was launched at him. No, Bakugo screamed as he covered himself. He didn't want to be impaled again. He waited. He expected the lance would skewer him again, but it never did. Slowly he opened his eyes and noticed none other than Izuku, huddling up against the wall, right where Bakugo had last seen him when he was just mere moments away from striking. "What?" Bakugo asked as he looked around. There was no one here, only the useless Deku. He glanced over at Deku, black and green-haired Deku. Deku didn't say anything. Instead, he was huddled in the corner, his eyes averted from Bakugo. Suddenly Izuku stood up and Bakugo heard footsteps. "Boys," Inko called. Not wanting anyone else to see him like this, Bakugo also stood up, just as Inko came into view. Mitsuki wants you both downstairs, Inko commented. We'll be right down, Izuku answered in a monotone voice as he tried to hide his face. I just have to use the bathroom, he commented before heading to the nearby washroom. He hurried inside. Bakugo meanwhile tried to maintain his image. He forced a calm expression on his face before agreeing to go with Inko. As he walked, he felt his throat as a new memory had been engraved into him. He was hallucinating. That's it. His meds were still making him trippy. There was no way she was here. She couldn't possibly be here. Why would she be here? Inside the washroom, Izuku locked the door before walking over to the sink. He scowled at his reflection, his amber eyes furious. Izuku turned on the tap and splashed himself with some water as he did. His eyes faded to green. The young boy almost doubled over as he felt his body felt drained, just barely keeping himself standing by supporting himself on the vanity. What was that? The Herrscher grumbled as she appeared beside the boy. The boy didn't answer her immediately. The contents of his stomach started to spill out into the sink. The repeated strike to his belly and the Herrscher's power had made him nauseous. I couldn't let you hurt him, Izuku reasoned as he turned to face the Herrscher. That's not what I meant, the Herrscher muttered under her breath as she floated towards Izuku. The young boy backed away from the young lady as she invaded his personal space. I meant ... What was that stunt you pulled back there? The Herrscher hissed. I don't know what you're talking about, Izuku defended. Oh yeah, the Herrscher scoffed. She then gestured to the mirror. Explain that, she told him. Izuku glanced in the mirror, noticing the bruised spots that had started to appear on his face from where Bakugo had hit him. There was slight swelling and some areas had started to change color. I'm waiting. The Herrscher glowered as she stood behind him. Izuku tried to find the words. This was an accident. He tried to argue. Oh, is it? Yes, Bakugo's not usually like this. Izuku tried to defend. He's worse, the Herrscher finished. The memories had definitely shown far worse states than what she was seeing. He's not himself, Izuku argued. He's under distress. His eyes then glared at the Herrscher. From you? Oh really? The Herrscher rolled her eyes. From me? I only met him a few days ago. What about all the times before that, Izuku? The Herrscher pressed on. Yeah ... Go on, Izuku ... spit it out. The Herrscher jeered. It was my fault, Izuku reasoned. He was stopped when the Herrscher held up her hand. No, she told him. Don't even say it. It wasn't your fault. It was his. He's the one who instigates those beatings, she answered. You're blind if you don't see it. No, I'm just... Izuku tried to find the words. I don't want to hurt anyone. He's my friend. He's a good person, a future hero. You call that a friend? The Herrscher scoffed. Don't make me laugh, human. I have seen true bonds, and yours with that worm, Bakugo, is but a pathetic, wretched thing. A friend is someone you play games with. A friend is someone willing to fry their brain to save you from danger. A friend is someone who can stick beside you ... even if you are bonded to me. The Herrscher growled. She recalled very vividly one very annoying yet very persistent insect who had dared to challenge her. A girl with silver hair, who had to rely on a robot to fight her and didn't even have real legs. The Herrscher may have hated her, but she certainly was aware enough to know she was a good friend. A friend named Bronya. Izuku ... Look at what he did to you. The Herrscher reiterated. It's nothing. It doesn't even hurt that much, Izuku reasoned. The Herrscher reached her fingers out and gently caressed his cheek. Ouch, he winced. The Herrscher shot him an unimpressed look. He hurt you. The Herrscher glared at him. Why do you even care? Izuku questioned. I don't, the Herrscher responded. She didn't. She just couldn't stand that her host, the one who was limiting her, who was restraining her, was this ... boy before her. I could feel every hit you received, she explained to him. Izuku's eyes widened. Oh, you forgot, we're linked. Remember, just like how you felt the acid burning you, I felt his blows. Every single one, the Herrscher explained. And you just stood there. And you let him do it. You just took it. She whispered. I couldn't do anything, Izuku told her. You could have asked me, the Herrscher told him. I was right there, Izuku. One word and I would have solved it. You would have killed him, Izuku reasoned. Even if that's true ... you still had so many other choices. The Herrscher scolded. I couldn't move. You kept me there. You forced me to stay there. I did, because I wasn't going to let you be a coward, the Herrscher told him. But I was wrong. I'm not a coward, Izuku answered. Oh, you aren't. You had multiple choices in that situation. The Herrscher held up 3 fingers at him. A. Ask for my help. B. Block him. Or C. Counterattack and fight back on your own. You know what you did. D. Do nothing. The Herrscher scolded. You did nothing. Izuku said nothing in response. It irked her even more. She gritted her teeth as she stared at the boy. It was frustrating to the Herrscher. If it was Kiana, she would have fought back. She would have beaten the brat senselessly for attacking her or her friend. You're weak, Izuku, but it's not because you don't have a quirk. The Herrscher spat. It's because you don't have a spine. If you had a spine, maybe people would actually notice you, especially if you actually stood on your own 2 feet and didn't double over when you got knocked over. You admired that boy because of his strength, yet you never had the courage to stand back up after he tore you down. The Herrscher scoffed. Perhaps he was right. If I didn't need your body, it would have been a waste to destroy. Izuku still said nothing. How could this insect be the one to hold back? How is it that this is the human whose will can stop her? It was maddening to think about. It was almost paradoxical. He was so fragile, so delicate, so easy to break down to others, yet with her, he was defiant to the end. It was like God decided to pull another twisted joke on her. You know what? I've had enough of this, the Herrscher told her host. I thought this night would be fun, but even I can't find any delight in this. Just head back out and stop wasting my time. The Herrscher sighed. Izuku for once did as she had told him. He turned around defeated and headed to the door. On second thought, hold on, the Herrscher told him. Izuku turned to her once more and she floated over to him. She frowned as she saw his swollen face. The Herrscher place touched his cheeks and Izuku felt a familiar warmth radiate through his body. It was uncomfortably pleasant. That should do it. I would have healed it completely, but I think that's a decent punishment for how much of a wimp you are. Izuku glanced at the mirror and noticed his face. It was healed, somewhat. He brought a finger up to his face and touched where the bruise had been. Ouch, he winced. It still hurt. I know it hurt even worse now, but it looked normal. What? Why did you? As tempting as it would be to let you go out there and worry your mother, potentially letting her grill you, and risking ruining her friendship, I am not in the mood for feeling your disgusting emotions running through me again. No doubt you'll tell them the same rubbish you told me, so I'm saving us the trouble. Go eat, get it over with, and let's head home, the Herrscher told him. Izuku stepped out of the restroom, leaving the Herrscher to vanish from his view. Yet he still felt her, an indescribable weight that hovered over him for the past few days as her presence lingered since he had processed she was bonded to him. Strangely, it wasn't just her presence that had weighed him, but also her words. Those cruel, cruel words she had spoken to him, not the ones that detailed and outlined her hatred, or her desire for destruction. It was not any of the insults she made about him being weak. He was long since accustomed to such abuse. However, the recent words she had spoken had left their mark on him. He hurt you. You let him. He's not your friend. Her words echoed as Izuku stepped forward. You did nothing. You just stood there and took it. You're not weak because you lack a quirk. You're weak because you lack a spine. It was not true, Izuku tried to rationalize. Once upon a time, he and Bakugo had been friends. They had been friends since they were little, before they had even gotten their quirks. They were once inseparable. But could that really be said now? After Bakugo got his quirk and Izuku didn't, things changed. Bakugo started to excel at everything. He was more popular, he was smarter, he was stronger, and he was braver. He was the coolest. He was everything Izuku wanted to be. It was like many people said, he was a prime candidate for being a hero. The Herrscher seemed to think otherwise. She dismissed the idea that Bakugo was a hero and ignored every bit of proof he was. Every detail given, she would find a fault and easily dismiss it away. What would she know anyway? Izuku would have liked to argue. The Herrscher was a villain, a parasite that had latched onto his body. She didn't care for him. All she cared about was destroying humanity. She only wanted to kill people. How could she know what it took to make a hero? Besides, it's not like she was any different from what she said about Bakugo. She used her power to hurt others for no reason. She threatened Izuku just the same. She abused her power to hurt those around her for no reason other than just because she could. And it was only because of Izuku's reluctance that she could never go further. Maybe it was all just her lies. Maybe it was all just a trick. She wanted him to listen to her, to give her a foothold. Then she'd just wrench it from and destroy his person. Izuku wasn't going to believe. He wasn't going to believe her lies. He renewed his resolve and walked downstairs. That's right. He wasn't going to let those lies get to him. He knew the truth. He trusted the truth. She's a liar, and he couldn't believe the words that came from her lips. Ouch! Izuku winced as he felt a jolt through his body. He held the side of the staircase to steady himself. His body still hurt. He was sore from his training and then Bakugo's. He caught himself. Bakugo venting his frustration had left him in even more pain. Still, Izuku continued as he went down the stairs. And then he saw them. Besides his mom, Mrs. Mitsuki, and Kachan, was a detective and All Might in his shrunken form. Izuku's heart almost dropped as panic set in. Why was All Might here? Why now? Did he know? What the hell is the problem now? A Herrscher snapped as she suddenly manifested beside him. Izuku almost jumped at her voice. Almost. The Herrscher had held him steady, if only for a few seconds, to avoid drawing attention. Well, she asked, half annoyed. It was all Izuku could mutter before her eyes followed where he was watching. Her eyes seemed to light up upon seeing All Might. Well, it looks like this night is not a total waste. She chuckled. She could do with a good fight, and All Might, as far she knew, was the best one in this world. Ah, Izuku, Inko called out. Come, this is Detective Naomasa and Mr. Yagi. she introduced the newcomers. Realizing he had no other options, Izuku walked down the steps. The pain from before seemed like a minor inconvenience compared to the sheer dread he felt now. "Hello, young Midoriya." All Might ... and "Oh, Mr. Yagi" greeted as he stretched out his hand. Izuku cautiously took it and shook it. His green eyes kept locked on the blazing blue of the symbol of peace. Izuku took a seat next to his mom. The Herrscher, as if daring to mock him, had floated and seated herself right beside All Might with an almost Cheshire-like grin on her face. "Now that both of you are here, we can finally get started." Detective Naomasa cleared his throat. "I'm sure you both have questions, so let's start with what this is about." "We are investigating the Herrscher," Yagi explained. "I know that you are all no strangers to her, and I am deeply sorry if this conversation may get a little uncomfortable. Have you found that witch?" Mitsuki growled as she stood up. The polite tone she had used with them prior had disappeared almost immediately, leaving an angry woman not dissimilar to her own child. No one could really blame her. It was an expected response for a mother to have to mention her son's attacker. "I'm afraid we haven't." Mr. Yagi lifted his hands in defense. "We're working on it. Trust me. That's why we are here." "Mitsuki, please calm down," Inko assured her as he held Mitsuki's arm and lowered her back to her seat. Suffice it to say, it worked shockingly well. Inko had managed to easily curb her friend's anger. As Mr. Yagi was saying, Detective Naomasa continued, "We've been looking at all possible leads we could find." "And have you found anything?" Inko asked. "The current theory we have is that she's targeting those connected to Aldera Junior High," the detective added. He let the room gasp in shock for a few seconds before he continued. "Now it's nothing concrete yet. So far it's just a sheer coincidence, but we can't rule it out just yet." The detective glanced at Yagi. The other man seemed to look a little nervous. At least that's what Izuku thought. "Currently, while she has 2 attacks, there have been pieces that have linked her to the school on at least 3 separate counts," Yagi explained. "The first is the destruction of the school in question. The second is when she attacked young Bakugo ... and the third was in the most recent attack with young Midori." He noted. "Wait ... what?" Inko gasped as she turned to her son. "You were attacked by the Herrscher," she repeated as held onto her son. "No, Mom," Izuku tried to reassure. "It wasn't like that. I was just around the villain attack when it happened. I got away and found my way home." Izuku tried to calm her. "I didn't want you to worry. Nothing bad had happened to me." "Mr. Midoriya," the detective interrupted. "I must inform you beforehand that my quirk is a polygraph quirk," he warned. "It allows me to deduce whether a person is telling the truth or not. I know you don't want your mother to worry, but right now we expect you to be very honest with us," the detective informed. "Oh ... okay." Izuku gulped. Oh, this was bad. There was no way he was going to be able to get out of this one. His mom would definitely find out for sure what had happened to him. She'd learn all about the Herrscher, and then Izuku didn't want to think about it. If the secret got out, the Herrscher would hurt them, and Izuku couldn't do anything about it. His gaze narrowly shifted to the Herrscher, who was just looking at him and smiling. Then he saw it. The blonde hair beside the Herrscher. Izuku's eyes glanced to All Might, and a warmth feeling started to bubble in his chest. Hope. Wait a minute. All Might was still here, he realized. He had fought the Herrscher before. Glancing at the detective, the gears in Izuku's head started to turn. Normally, a confession like this might sound crazy, but the detective could verify he was telling the truth. If he could warn them quickly enough, then All Might could stop the Herrscher. Izuku took a deep breath. "I'd hold that tongue if I were you," the Herrscher warned with a smug smirk. "Do you really think it's that easy to betray me?" she questioned. "Or do you not realize how dire the situation really is for you?" Izuku was caught like a deer in headlights, and those headlights were piercing amber eyes that had locked onto his soul. "Don't worry, I'm not mad," the Herrscher assured. "I've expected it for some time now, but I must warn you, this will not end how you expect it," she explained. "If you lie to them, then they figure you are lying, think you are connected to me, arrest you, and force you to reveal what you know. You'll either be imprisoned for aiding me along with your mother, or you'll be locked up all alone in a cell and left to rot with only me as your sole companion. Alternatively, you can tell the truth either now or in that scenario and risk this next outcome." The Herrscher chided. "You tell the truth, I take over, and in the brief moments of shock that everyone might have, I kill everyone here," the Herrscher noted. "So far I've avoided killing because I was being pragmatic, Izuku. I've left your mother alive as she's a decent tool to manipulate you with. I've let Bakugo live because I wanted to make him suffer for you," the Herrscher listed off. "As for All Might, he's simpler than you think. He has one foot in the grave, a very exploitable weak spot to hit, and my power is the perfect counter to him. If you sell me out, I don't really have to care what happens next. They are all fair game, and I can do it very quickly, very easily," the Herrscher whispered. "So tell me ... what are you going to do?" "I can stop you," Izuku tried to defend. "No, you can't," the Herrscher mocked. "All I need is to overpower you for only 1 second, and that's it for at least one person. A single lance, straight through the heart, it's all it will take. So I ask again, what are you going to do?" Izuku didn't answer her. He wasn't sure what to do. He didn't know what to do. He clenched his fist. No, there has to be some way for him to get out of this. So now that we've cleared that up, which one of you would like to go first? The detective questioned. Deku. Bakugo volunteered. You go first. Make it quick. He scowled. What? Why me? Izuku argued. Simple. Everyone already knows about me. Maybe they'll find something new from you. Bakugo brushed aside. Izuku wanted to argue, but he couldn't. He didn't have a rebuttal. All right. Izuku sighed in defeat. Mrs. Bakugo, Mrs. Midoriya, may we please go in another room? Naomasa asked the two moms. Inko glanced at her son. She was hesitant, but eventually she conceded. Izuku didn't say no, and she didn't want to jeopardize her son's testimony. She had a feeling he'd try and lie if she was watching. He always tried to lie to avoid worrying her or hurting her. You may. Inko relented, seeing Inko give permission. Mitsuki leads the detective and Izuku to Masaru's private study. Once there, she closes the door and heads back to join Yagi, Inko, and Katsuki. So how do we do this exactly? Izuku questioned. I mean, how does your quirk work factor into this, if you don't mind me asking? Well, it's simple, True Man told him. I will ask you a question. If it is true, my quirk will tell me it is. If it isn't, then I will know you are not telling the truth. That's a really good quirk for a detective, Izuku admitted. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that. The detective chuckled. All right then, his face hardened. Let's start going through the questions. Question 1. When was the first time you ever saw the Herrscher? Oh, that's an easy one. I saw her the day after she attacked Bakugo. She was on the news broadcast. Izuku answered as he recalled that. Horrible day. He had thought it was a nightmare, but it wasn't. It was real, very real. And have you seen her since? The detective followed up. Well, she's been on the news a lot. Izuku noted. I meant in person. We have an eyewitness who claims they saw you at the last villain attack scene. Did you see the Herrscher in person there? The detective questioned. Well, I saw she was on the roof. Izuku noted. Anywhere else before the roof? Well. The detective looked up at Izuku. His eyes were very serious. Izuku had to choose his next words very carefully, especially with the two pairs of eyes looking at him. Yes, Izuku admitted. I did see her. Where? She was in the cafe. No one saw her at the time because nobody could. I didn't even know she was there, not until what? The detective asked curiously. The roof had collapsed and I was buried under the rubble, Izuku admitted. That's when I found out she was there. She was buried under the rubble with you. The detective questioned in surprise. But the rubble wasn't disturbed. All Might had arrived and cleared it out himself. That's because. Izuku paused for a moment. There were other ways of describing what the Herrscher did. Right. She moved the rubble off. She teleported him away. She saved me, Izuku answered. To say the detective was surprised was an understatement. He tried to hide it, but it was clear that wasn't the answer was expecting to hear. Although it also wasn't the answer Izuku wanted to give, it did have better follow-up. Is there a reason she saved you? Naomasa asked suspiciously. When I talked to her, she said she was debating whether to wait for me to fall unconscious or die first, Izuku answered. However, when she couldn't tell what was going to happen, she just opened a portal and warped us to another location, Izuku explained. I see, Naomasa noted. So, are there any other questions? Izuku wondered. Do you have any idea why she'd target Aldera Junior High? The detective questioned. I'm not sure I can answer that without sounding biased, Izuku admitted. How so? I don't have many pleasant memories with the school, Izuku confessed. It's always been a miserable experience. The teachers were hard on me, and it always got a little rough with my classmates, Izuku told him. If the Herrscher had unpleasant memories like mine, I can see her destroying the school. I see. You think she wants revenge? Who could say? Izuku admitted. For all the coverage we've gotten, I doubt any of us really know the Herrscher, me included. She's an enigmatic being. She's less of a person and feels more like an alien in a sense, or some sort of spirit or ghost. I'm not sure I'd even understand what she thinks. Can't say I'm surprised. The detective agreed. No one had actually figured out the Herrscher at the moment, and that was the problem. How do you counter something you don't know? So the next question I have deals with Katsuki Bakugo. Do you have any idea why she might target him? The detective asked. This one had stumped Izuku. The Herrscher's explanation was that she hated him because Izuku hated him. That couldn't be true, right? Would it make him an accomplice if he did answer that his rage was the reason? No, he should relax. Speak the truth. Bakugo's a good person, Izuku answered. He's got the makings of a good hero when he gets older. I'm sure the Herrscher targeted him because of that. This time the detective paused. He looked down at what he had been writing the response from. Is there a problem, sir? Izuku questioned. Izuku, may I ask you another question before I answer? Sure. Izuku, is Bakugo your friend? Naomasa asked. Yes, Izuku answered. We've been friends since childhood. I see. So what does your quirk say? Izuku questioned. It says you are lying, Naomasa noted. That's that's not true, Izuku defended. Bakugo's my friend, I believe that. That's interesting, Naomasa noted. Alright, you've convinced me. I believe Bakugo's your friend, he reassured Izuku. I'll disregard the previous answers on the matter. Is that okay? Oh, okay, sir, Izuku answered. You've answered everything I've gotten so far, the detective noted. Was it helpful? Izuku wondered. Hard to say, but we hope it is. The Herrscher has caused a lot of problems for us. Don't I know it? Izuku muttered. The detective dismissed Izuku. The young boy felt relief that he had just narrowly managed to get by the detective's lie detection quirk. Upon leaving the room, there was a light feeling in his body. It was strange. The Herrscher's hostility had vanished. She was still there, but he didn't feel her anger as much now. She wasn't even visible now. Herrscher, Izuku tried to call out. He could feel something, a light response from her. She was still present, but it seemed like she was not in the mood to speak. Izuku didn't know how to feel about that. On one hand, it didn't seem like she was considering killing everyone, but the silence still unsettled him. He had tried to be as vague as possible and played very loosely with the way he described things. His secret wasn't revealed, but he also wasn't lying. At least he sincerely hoped he didn't get caught. Still, when he rejoined the others, he found All Might chatting with his and Bakugo's mom. Seems like the pro hero really had a way with words. Surprisingly, it was All Might who had noticed him. Ah, young Midoriya, you're back, he addressed. Is everything okay? Yeah, it was fine, Izuku answered. Catch on. I'm going, Deku. Bakugo spat. Izuku didn't respond, instead waiting for Bakugo to leave and reach out of earshot. Mrs. Midoriya, is it okay if I step out and talk to your son now? I have my questions that might need answering. Yagi told Inko. Okay. Inko agreed. From how apprehensive she was before to how she was acting now, Izuku was stunned to say the least. He guessed All Might really do have a way with words. Once again he followed All Might, this time outside the Bakugo residence. So, Izuku wondered, how can I help you, sir? Well, credit where it's due. You kept your word. All Might smiled. As for help, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you remember what I said to you on the roof? He asked. Yeah, I remember, Izuku answered. I couldn't be a hero without a quirk. Izuku sighed. You don't have to remind me. I didn't come to remind you. I came to apologize. All Might told him. I told you, you couldn't be a hero without a quirk. I was wrong. I'm sorry. What? Izuku said in disbelief. I said I was wrong. All Might admitted. You see, at the second villain attack, I met a young kid, and they told me a young boy who matched your description saved them from being buried under the rubble. He explained. I presumed that boy was you. Yeah. That was me, Izuku admitted. Well, that boy thinks you are a hero. All Might informed. And I'm inclined to agree with him. What? But you said. I know what I said. All Might told him. I said you can't be a hero without a quirk, and I still stand by that, but I should have worded it better. You can't be a pro hero without a quirk. All Might explained. However, a hero is not just someone who has some fancy power or cool ability or even some amazing gadget. When it comes down it, a hero is someone who saves lives, and Izuku, I believe, you can still be a hero. All Might smiled at him. Izuku hadn't even realized when his eyes started to water, nor did he notice when he started to cry. Easy there, All Might told him as he placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. I know it's probably been hard for you, but I see this spark, it's amazing. I believe you have potential. All Might continued. And I'm also personally recommending you to UA. What? Izuku gasped. Is this for real? UA isn't just a school for pro heroes. There are many who go and enter into other fields. If you want a good education, then it's the right place to go. And if you work hard, maybe just maybe you can take a chance at the hero program. All Might told him. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now. You can think about it for the time being. All Might pulled out a card from his pocket and handed it to Izuku. It's a big decision and you should probably talk it over with your mom. Thank you, All Might. Don't thank me yet. Just prove me right. All Might told him. That said, if you still feel you need training, you can always call me or send me a message and I can see what I can do. I know it may not look like it now, but once upon a time I was in a similar spot to you, Izuku, and someone took a chance on me. All Might informed. I'll keep it in mind, Izuku said in disbelief. Thank you. I won't let you down. I know you won't. All Might told him. Now let's head back inside before we worry those two. Yeah, sure, Izuku answered. Izuku Midoriya was a paradox to her. He was strong yet weak, brave yet fearful, smart yet incredibly naive. He was someone she had been sure of. No, the Herrscher had been positive that he would have been an easy host. She was betting on one of two outcomes when she looked at him. Outcome 1, Izuku would be just as spiteful as she was to the world that had wronged him, to the people who had abused him. He was tormented all his life, branded as something less than normal by the standards of this world. In a world where every human seemed to have a unique power, Izuku had none, and he was often seen as an inferior being because of it. He was taken advantage of because of it. The strong preyed on the weak, Izuku at the absolute bottom of the food chain. His teachers, his peers, and everyone alike would see him as something not worthwhile. They would see him as just fodder and filler, according to the Herrscher's own logic. That should have made him angry. Angry like they had been when the memories of the Babylon labs surfaced. Angry like they had been when they remembered how so many girls were dehumanized and stripped of what identity they had, becoming just numbers and statistics, human lab rats. While Izuku's pain was nowhere near those girls, he should have had something, anything, for her to hold on to, but he didn't. In the end, he didn't want to destroy the world that wronged him, he wanted to save it, a concept that was so foreign and alien to the Herrscher. She had expected someone who would have understood her, at least on some level, but no, he was just another stupid hero. As for the next outcome, since he wasn't someone who'd side with her, the Herrscher had another plan for him. She'd crush his will and devour his spirit. It required more effort, but she had been so sure it was possible. He was alone, he was beaten down often. He should have been ready and willing to give up. It should have taken her no time to erode him. Yet Izuku persevered. At the time she hadn't quite figured out why or how. She checked his heart and his mind and found no other additional entities living in his body. The Herrscher was the only one inside Izuku, not like Kiana who had the blasted chicken accompanying her. Yet against all odds, against the mental dread she instilled, he resisted her. Now in front of Bakugo, the Herrscher finally understood why. Izuku was strong, mentally strong. He'd been able to stand back up after everything the world threw at him and still smile, and still see the good in people. He was also conditioned to it. He didn't see the unfairness that befell him. It was a black and white world to the boy. Bakugo could abuse him, and it would be fine because Bakugo could be a hero. Heroes were good. They were needed for society. However, the Herrscher was a villain, and no matter what, villains could never win. So even if the Herrscher offered him protection, safety, power, and the chance at revenge, he'd never take it. Not unless he truly wanted to live. Izuku was infuriating to her, and he was going to become even more so if she didn't stop it. She left when she realized how he had gotten out of that dilemma. He had found the one option she hadn't considered. He was clever, she'll give him that, and that only made her cautious. Then if things weren't bad enough, All Might came and reaffirmed his dreams. The man who had once shattered Izuku's world had rebuilt it with even stronger support. She should have killed him when she had the chance. Nevertheless, now she was seething and trying to think of a new plan. She desperately needed a new strategy. So did you get anything? All Might questioned his partner as they drove back to the office. After finishing the interviews, the duo bid the two families goodbye before promising to keep in touch. For the most part, everything had gone well on his side of things. Now he only hoped things went well for Naomasa as well. Well, I got some info, but how useful it is another matter entirely. True Man answered. Now I'm curious. Anything about the Herrscher? All Might asked. Yeah, and it's rather surprising. True Man answered. The reason Izuku is alive ... is because the Herrscher saves him. True Man explained. Wait ... what? All Might exclaimed. But how? She wasn't there prior. No one had seen the Herrscher before the attack, let alone in the cafe. According to Izuku, the Herrscher was invisible for the time being. He hadn't even noticed her, but she had been right there when everything happened. She was there when he was buried under the rubble. True Man explained. So ... are they connected? All Might asked in disbelief. No, Izuku never knew of the Herrscher till he saw the news reports of her a day after her debut, and from what he told me, she was just waiting to see if he fainted or died before getting bored. Overall, she doesn't seem connected to him. True Man noted. I see. All Might sighed. Well, that's a relief. You seem to have taken quite the interest in this boy. Naomasa pointed out. You sound like Nezu. Just an observation. The detective pointed out. He reminds me of myself. All Might noted. I was like him once, young, quirkless, and hoping to be a hero in a world where even babies could probably kill me. All Might pondered. Someone took a chance on me. I wanted to return the favor. You want to make him your successor? Naomasa questioned. I've considered it. All Might admitted. However, I don't think that would be the right call. A lot of villains have become more active, and while AFO hasn't shown himself, the Herrscher has. I don't think it's a good idea to pass on OFA to someone else with chaos just brewing at the edge. Maybe if things were more peaceful, I'd entertain the thought. So then why train Izuku? Naomasa asked. Because that's the ideal scenario. All Might explained. I'm no fool. If push comes to shove, there is a chance I can be injured or worse. In my mind, Izuku's the best candidate for OFA, but he can't just take it right off the bat. Plus, I wanted to show my support. So basically, if I'm getting this right, you're training him so that while he may not need to be your successor, he can still be so in case of emergency. Naomasa summarized. Yup, All Might agreed. Best case scenario, he'll never get OFA ever. Are you at least going to tell him about this? Naomasa asked. Nope, All Might answered. Naomasa cast him a glance. Don't give me that look. I just made a big deal to young Midoriya that he can be a hero without a quirk. Do you know how shattering it would be if I suddenly walked up to him and said, here's my quirk, now go be a hero? It would be like hitting him with the US Smash. All Might said. I told him I believed he could be a hero without a quirk, and I don't intend to go back on those words. Oh, brother. Naomasa shook his head. I can't imagine how Night Eye would react. You finally choose a successor, and you don't even plan to give him the power unless you're about to die. It's a risk I'm willing to take. All Might told him he'd keep an eye out for other potential candidates should the need arise, but he'd ultimately hope they would never be needed. While being the symbol of peace was an honor, it was also a burden, one that he knew he would never wish on anyone else. After having dinner with the Bakugos, Izuku and Inko returned home tired but content. The night had gone on without any more hiccups, and Izuku's mood had been noticeably brighter, much to Inko's delight and Katsuki's dismay. Of course, how long he'd be so cheerful was going to be put to the test soon enough. Upon entering his bedroom, Izuku was greeted by none other than the Herrscher of the Void, who was leaning against the wall with her arms folded. Izuku gulped. She had disappeared after the interview. He had hoped that was the light of her appearance for the night. Sadly, he was wrong. He closed the door before him. The Herrscher, upon noticing, gestured to a chair opposite to her. Without needing any further words, Izuku sat in the chair and the Herrscher mimicked his motions and sat on his bed. You seem happy for a boy who had the tuna knocked out of him by a loud mutt and then interrogated by a detective. The Herrscher noted. I take it the rest of the evening went well. Yeah, it went well, Izuku answered. He was still wary of the Herrscher. Just an hour or two ago, she almost threatened to kill everyone around him, and now she was here acting polite. It unnerved him how easy it was for her to flip the switch. I didn't tell the detective anything incriminating, Izuku noted. I heard. The Herrscher answered. I must admit, I was surprised you found a third answer. You figured out the only solution that would satisfy you as a victory for yourself. It's impressive. She said the last part in a rather forced manner. Oh, well, thank you. Izuku took the praise with caution. What was she getting after? Nevertheless, you still lost some of the little respect I had for you. The Herrscher deadpanned. You were more than willing to sell me out. You actually schemed it, yet it never occurred to you to also sell out Bakugo. She sneered. Why? What? A lie detector comes to the house. You could have told them everything about what Bakugo did and you didn't. The Herrscher explained. You let the boy who hurt you walk free while you conspired to expose the one who healed your wounds. You see what's wrong with this picture, right? The Herrscher asked. Well, the thought just didn't occur to me. Izuku defended. Of course it didn't. The Herrscher sighed. Because let me guess, Bakugo's a hero and I'm a villain. Is that it? Yes, Izuku answered without thinking. The Herrscher glared at him. I mean, and oh. Do you still believe Bakugo's a good person? The Herrscher questioned. Or are you just in denial? She questioned. When asked by the detective, he called you out on those being lies. She recounted. Izuku sighed. He was forced to finally confront the idea. For a long time, I've never wanted to admit it. Izuku finally confessed in defeat. How could I? Bakugo was the only friend I had when I was younger, and when I grew older, he was the only person I could have even claimed was a friend. So you lied to yourself. The Herrscher reiterated. You wanted to keep that false sense of friendship so you wouldn't be isolated. Surprisingly, she didn't seem to be trying to mock him. Despite keeping her echo, her tone was different than its usual mocking and taunting. Yeah, I lied to myself, Izuku admitted. Well then, now that you've admitted he's a bad person, why don't you let me go and punish him? The Herrscher asked. I promise I won't kill him. I can't let you do that, Izuku told her. You've already done so much to him. Of course, the Herrscher scoffed. Even when you admit he's a jerk, you still defend him. That's not why I'm defending him, Izuku argued. You defended him when he beat you. You defended him when the detective interrogated you, and now you defend him even when you admit he's bad and I decide to punish him. The Herrscher listed off. It seems like you still think he's a good person. He is good hero material. I'm not defending him because I think he's still a good person. I'm defending him because I want to believe I'm still a good person, Izuku argued. You've made it quite clear what your solutions are. You can't expect me in good conscience to let you do as you please, Izuku retorted. The Herrscher sighed. So, it seems we're truly stuck at an impasse. The Herrscher lamented. Tell me, now that you are aware that bad people can be heroes, do you think good people can be villains? She questioned. It's possible, Izuku admitted. There are cases of people being labeled as villains because they simply tried to be heroes without a license. He recalled. However, unfortunately, as much as I would like to believe otherwise, you don't seem to qualify as such, Izuku noted. You're doubting my intentions, the Herrscher noted. You've told me many times. Your end goal is the destruction of humanity. You've drilled it into my head. It feels hard to believe you could have any justifiable reason for such a desire. Izuku noted. I have a reason, the Herrscher added. She had 322 reasons for wanting humans to die, possibly more if she considered all the individuals outside the labs. Izuku looked at her with a curious gaze. "Would you tell me?" he wondered. The Herrscher looked like she was about to say something, but she held her tongue. Izuku could take note of the changing expression on her face. "No," she answered. "Someone like you wouldn't understand." The Herrscher told him, "Someone like me. You believed for years that your suffering was acceptable, all because the one who tormented you could have been a hero." The Herrscher explained, "Your pain was ultimately not a factor, so long as a hero was not hindered for the good of humanity. Such a mindset is not one I believe would understand me." The Herrscher elaborated. If anything, she felt Izuku would have said they deserved it. It was for the good of the world after all. "I see." The two stayed silent for a moment. "Well, I think I've said my piece for tonight," the Herrscher noted as she stood up. They were both stubborn individuals, opposite in many ways except this one aspect. "Thank you for healing me," Izuku told the Herrscher. "It meant a lot. HMMPH. You're my host. I need you to be in good shape." The Herrscher dismissed. Izuku had gone to bed not long after. The Herrscher was left once more with her own thoughts. While he slept, the Herrscher kept watch, hovering in his room while she pondered her next options. "I shouldn't have antagonized him." She mentally kicked herself. Her plans for an aggressive takeover had backfired on her. Izuku's will had been stronger than she realized, and his heroic nature was far beyond what she had expected. In hindsight, it seems like the best solution would have been to slowly corrupt him to her side. He was weak, vulnerable even. All she had to do was become his friend, become someone he would trust, someone who he'd listen to without question. Unfortunately, none of those plans seemed viable now. He was all too aware of her nature. Even if they were capable of being cordial with one another, he'd have doubts about her motives. She had made her desires unapologetically very clear, and they were directly against his nature. The Herrscher even doubted she could fake a redemption. Given her host's fleeting moments of intelligence, he'd probably realize she was only faking. All seemed lost for the Herrscher. That was until she took note of her host's sleeping form. Hang on, maybe it wasn't. The Herrscher recalled the very troublesome family from almost a lifetime ago. The Caslana family, specifically Cecilia and Siegfried. A long time ago, Siren tried to trap them in a dream, but Cecilia had turned it around on her. That had weakened Siren considerably in a sense, left her exposed, and made her ponder things she didn't normally consider. Siren's will had almost faltered right then and there. A big consequence of that dream was no doubt the birth of the Herrscher's other half, the girl who would take the name Kiana Caslana. Perhaps she could take some inspiration from that experience. The Herrscher floated to Izuku and pressed her fingers on his forehead and his heart. The Herrscher began to focus, thinking of a very pleasant dream. Izuku found himself in a strange place. It felt familiar and unfamiliar, if that made sense. It looked like the park he and his friends used to play around, but it was snowing and all the buildings were smaller, like those old villages from those stories he read. He didn't feel so cold even though he had no cloak. "Help me," a voice called. Izuku on instinct rushed over to the source. Moving around some parts of the playground, Izuku found the owner. On the ground was a girl with bluish, maybe silver-like hair and draconic features. However, the strange girl wasn't what surprised him, it was her assaulters. Standing over the girl was Bakugo and two of his friends. They were mocking and teasing the girl, calling her names. The girl whimpered and Izuku instinctively ran to protect the girl. "Leave her alone, catch on," Izuku shouted at Bakugo and his cronies. Izuku felt terrified. He was shaking in his boots and tears were threatening to come from his eyes. He had jumped in to save the girl without thinking, but he soon realized where he was. Yet he still persisted. "If you keep making her cry, I'll stop you myself," he told them, trying his best to be brave. Bakugo smirked at him maliciously. He punched his face, creating a small explosion on the impact. Izuku recoiled instinctively in fear. Still trying to be a hero, Bakugo taunted. The two friends he had behind them shifted as their own powers activated. "You don't stand a chance without a quirk," Bakugo smiled. The three boys looked at Izuku with predatory grins before they lunged at him and the girl. Izuku froze, his body unable to move. Yet, just as they were about to hit, a purple blur came to the side of Izuku. "Don't touch my Bella," a girl screamed as she swung a baseball bat over her shoulder. The bat recoiled with one of the attacking kids, knocking him to the ground. Bakugo and the other had stopped momentarily to see the girl. She was a young girl around Izuku's age, with a mass of purple hair and soft, gentle amber eyes. The boy who was struck whimpered in pain before running away. "Hey, get back here, you loser," Bakugo screamed as his partner fled. He then turned to the remaining one. "You just gonna stand there? Get her," he ordered the other kid. The next boy did as he was told. He extended his wings and flew to the girl who held the bat and swung it again to knock him away. However, the victory was short-lived. Bakugo blindsided the girl, releasing an explosion in her face. The girl was knocked down and the bat had rolled over, lying in front of Izuku. "Think you can make a fool of us, you little brat?" Bakugo screamed. Yet that was not where the bully stopped. He started to wail at the girl, hitting her with an explosion into the ground. She looked up to Izuku with pleading eyes. Being a hero is about saving people, and I believe you can still be a hero, Izuku. All Might's words echoed in the boy's head. Izuku remembered all the pain he felt being in the girl's place. He couldn't stand seeing it again. Katsuki shouldn't be doing that. He shouldn't be doing that to someone else. Then something snapped. Izuku ran forward, grabbing the bat off the ground. He'd save the girl. He'd save her from Bakugo. He held it firm as he ran up to Bakugo and the girl. "Stop it, Kachan!" Izuku screamed as he swung the bat right into the Bakugo's face. Bakugo was knocked unconscious by the swing, several of his baby teeth coming out and some blood running from his nose. Izuku huffed, surprised by the action he had taken. He looked down at Katsuki, almost feeling sick by what he saw, yet before he could fully process those thoughts he was hugged by the two girls. "Thank you," the draconic-looking girl told him as she and her friend pulled Izuku away from Bakugo's battered body. After they had moved to a different spot, the girls introduced themselves. "I'm Siren and this is Bella," the purple-haired girl told him. "I'm Izuku," he responded. "Thank you for saving me," Bella repeated once more. "I didn't really do anything." Izuku humbly denied it. "Bella, why don't you go and tell Mom?" "We're coming," Siren ordered the other girl. "Oh, okay," Bella answered before leaving. Once Bella had disappeared from view, Siren turned her attention to Izuku. Her eyes were familiar to Izuku, but he couldn't quite tell why. "Thank you for saving Bella," Siren told him, "and for beating that bully." She smiled. "Like I said, I really didn't do much," Izuku denied. "You did more than me. You beat two of them. You still saved me." Siren smiled. "Weren't you scared?" the purple-haired girl commented. "You had frozen up earlier," she noted. I was," Izuku admitted. "But then ... then I saw your eyes," Izuku told the amber-eyed girl. "My eyes," the girl repeated in confusion. "You looked like ... you were asking for help," Izuku told her. As the words left his mouth, Siren suddenly acted strange. Something clicked in the girl. Her body tensed as her eyes glowered. "What?" she dismissed. I didn't." Siren had wanted to say something, but she'd stopped herself. She took a deep breath, then her body relaxed and her eyes dimmed. "I'm glad you saved me, Izuku," she told the boy with a smile. "You're my hero," she giggled. "Thank you ... and no one's ever said that before." Izuku blushed. He tried to hide it, tried fidgeting with his hands to ease his anxiety. That's when he realized he still had the bat on his person. "Though, I almost forgot. Here." Izuku offered the bat back to the girl. "It's a little dirty." Izuku innocently apologized when he noticed a stained spot on it. Siren eyed the spot. It was the dried blood that had fallen on the bat when Izuku had swung it. She smiled at Izuku before pushing the bat back into his hands. "Keep it," she told him. "I'm sure you'll use it better than me." She giggled. Are you sure?" Izuku questioned. "Positive," Siren smiled, her eyes glowing softly. Back in the real world, the Herrscher smiled as she saw the dream play out before. Izuku may not trust the Herrscher, but he would trust others. While it may not have been real, it did reveal something about Izuku. He's very willing to do what it takes to save someone in danger. It's where he's his most courageous, the most reckless, and perhaps ... the most vulnerable. She was very pleased with this outcome. It may have been just a dream, but seeing him smack Bakugo had been satisfying. She had assumed Izuku might have just tackled him, but he had actually taken up the bat and caved it into the other boy's skull. Perhaps there was something she could work with. Glancing at the sleeping boy, the Herrscher reached out and caressed his face in an almost tender manner. She called upon the Honkai in their body once more, and this time she properly healed the injuries he had received from Bakugo the night before. It was a small reward. However, despite this success, there was one thing that bothered the Herrscher. She had staged everything for Siren to be the victim. How bruised she'd look, how her voice would sound. The only thing the Herrscher hadn't quite done was the eyes. She didn't know how. Eyes were the windows to the souls after all. She had just used her own, albeit altered as placeholders. So ... what did Izuku mean when he said her eyes looked like they were pleading?